Chapter 874. Maybe it's just the same name. Besides, establishing a chamber of commerce is not fooling around. It only shows that this person is ambitious. Jiwu didn't agree and said, plus you also know that it's impossible for that world to come to the immortal realm with the power of a deified spirit. He shouldn't be Yu Qianqiu. Why not? Xuanhuan counted with his fingers. First, the name Yu Qianqiu is too rare. The probability of them sharing the same name is too low. Secondly, the two of them just so happen to be at the deity transformation stage. Only that guy would dare to establish a chamber of commerce with a deity transformation stage cultivation. Third, don't be fooled by his soul formation cultivation. In fact, both of them are extraordinary. It is entirely possible for them to come to the immortal realm. Master and disciple? Have you met his master? Hearing him praise the master and disciple, Jiwu couldn't help but ask, who is his master? Xuanhuan was in a dilemma. Should he answer or not? His reaction made Jiwu even more curious. A trace of craftiness flashed through her bright eyes as she said, is it not convenient to reveal it to a girl? If it's inconvenient, then don't say it. Xuanhuan was embarrassed to hide it. After all, she saved his life. He hesitated and said, it's not that I don't want to tell you, but I'm afraid you will be angry. Angry? Jiwu suddenly giggled and said, do you think we have the right to be angry when we are imprisoned in this place? Brother E doesn't understand me. I'm not a narrow-minded person. I don't need to be angry about everything. If there is anyone I can't forgive, it is Yi Zhao's disciple, slaying Luo. I didn't expect them to return to the immortal realm. Don't let me leave this place. Once I leave, I will not let any of them go. Jiwu stared at Xuanhuan sharply. Don't tell me that Yu Qianqiu's master is slaying Luo? If that's the case, then I'm sorry, brother Xuanhuan. I will not let Yu Qianqiu go either. As long as it's someone from the Rakshasa faction, I won't let a single one of them go. The resentment in her words was so deep that it was unforgettable. It could be seen that the sneak attack by the Rakshasa and the others when she was heavily injured had indeed hurt her heart. Xuanhuan waved his hand and said, sister, don't misunderstand. Yu Qianqiu's master is definitely not Rakshasa. Rakshasa is not even qualified to carry his master's shoes. Jiwu was surprised. She asked suspiciously, Yu Qianqiu has such a powerful teacher? Could he be one of the 12 great immortal monarchs of the immortal world? That's not right. I have no enmity with the 12 immortal dukes, so there's no need for me to be angry over them. Actually, there's no harm in telling you. I just hope that you can keep it a secret. After all, Yu Qianqiu is my benefactor. I don't want to hurt him, said Xuanhuan with a bitter smile. Jiwu nodded curiously as a form of assurance. Xuanhuan knew that she was a person of her word. Without hesitation, he said slowly, in fact, you have met his master and fought with him. His master is the one who seriously injured you in the Heaven and Earth universe formation. Bai Changchun. Jiwu exclaimed in shock. His master is the Bai Changchun who challenged the Emperor of the Underworld in the Underworld world. Thinking of the green-robed elder, she still had lingering fear. The majestic fighting spirit contained in that thin figure made people respect and fear him. He was really a character. In the Heaven and Earth universe formation, the scene of 4 middle-stage immortal emperor experts fighting him together was still vivid in Jiwu's mind. Yes, he is Yu Qianqiu's master. Xuanhuan sighed with a complicated expression. From the first time I saw him, I knew he was a belligerent, but he did have some extraordinary abilities. I didn't expect him to be so crazy that he had the courage to challenge a terrifying character like the Emperor of the Underworld. He was seriously injured by the Emperor of the Underworld, but he still managed to escape. The Emperor of the Underworld has lost face this time. This Bai Changchun has undoubtedly shaken the authority of the Emperor of the Underworld, letting the people in the Underworld know that the Emperor of the Underworld is not invincible. I'm afraid the old monsters in the Underworld will be restless. The Underworld will be in chaos. Jiwu was speechless. She really didn't expect that the master of the guy she didn't even want to look at was actually Bai Changchun. Her master had seriously injured her, and his disciple had saved her life at a critical moment. What was this? But now she believed Xuanhuan's words. That Yu Qianqiu might really be the current Yu Qianqiu in the immortal world. Brother you don't have to look at me like that. Jiwu shook her head and smiled bitterly. Come to think of it, that guy also saved my life. His master is his master and he is him. I'm not so narrow-minded as to blame his master's wrongs on him. Since he came to the immortal world and saved our lives, shouldn't we send a congratulatory gift to him now that his World Chamber of Commerce is about to open? You want to send him a congratulatory gift? Xuanhuan was a little speechless. He remembered that Yu Qianqiu touched Ji Wu's buttocks when she was unconscious. If Ji Wu knew about it, she would rather let Luo Sha and the others go than let Yu Qianqiu go. Ahem. Don't send a congratulatory gift. If the two of us send a congratulatory gift, I'm afraid it will immediately attract Jin Tai's attention. That will hurt him. Heir Xuejuan quickly stopped them. Ji Wu was molested in front of him and he felt bad. If Ji Wu gave a gift to the person who molested her, Heir Xuejuan would not be able to bear it. So, he quickly found a reasonable reason to stop them. As for the matter of Ji Wu being touched by Yu Qianqiu, Heir Xuejuan decided to keep it to himself. He must not tell anyone. Otherwise Ji Wu would fall out with him. Every time he thought of this, Heir Xuejuan gritted his teeth. That kid did something shameful, and I have to take the initiative to cover it up for him. Ji Wu nodded slowly when she heard the words. Brother Heir is thoughtful. That will indeed hurt him. Heir Xuejuan was speechless. He picked up the guqin on the table, and his radish-like fingers plucked the strings, making a sound like an old cow pulling a broken cart. He wailed like a ghost and howled like a wolf to cover up his inner embarrassment. I have a flower planted in my heart, budding and waiting to bloom. Day and night, I eagerly await those who have the heart to come to my dream. The hoarse voice, coupled with the ghostly howl, immediately made Ji Wu's expression change. She immediately got up to leave. Although Heir Xuejuan's singing was terrible, the lyrics were still very clear. Every word was enough to make people tremble. When Ji Wu heard the lyrics clearly, she became absent-minded in an instant. She actually patiently listened to it. As she listened, Ji Wu was a little absent-minded along with Heir Xuejuan's ghostly howl. She muttered, After love, you know the importance of love. After getting drunk, you know the strength of wine. Flowers bloom and fade in the end. Fate does not stay like the spring breeze that comes and goes. Women are like flowers in a dream. After the song ended, Heir Xuejuan found that Ji Wu was actually listening to him seriously. He immediately said in surprise, Sister Ji Wu, what do you think? Did I make a lot of progress this time? Ji Wu came back to her senses when she heard the words. Her jade-like hand touched her forehead and she said weakly, It's very unpleasant to listen to, but... Hearing the first two sentences, Heir Xuejuan suddenly became depressed. However, when he heard the word, but, he suddenly became energetic again. His eyes lit up and he asked, But what? I'm listening and I'm willing to listen to your advice. Ji Wu smiled faintly, looking at him up and down with some admiration. She showed an incredulous expression and said, Although the song is unpleasant, I really can't see it. I didn't expect Brother Heir to be a person who is rough but delicate. You can actually write such beautiful lyrics. It's really profound. Those who don't understand the heart of women can't write it. I was deeply immersed in it just now. I really like it. I'm ashamed to say that I have underestimated Brother Heir. Then you think too highly of me now. Heir Xuejuan was dumbfounded on the spot. His mouth twitched 3 times and he asked dryly, Is there nothing good about the song I sang except the lyrics? This? Ji Wu looked at him and she couldn't bear to say too much to provoke him, so she euphemistically said, Everyone's appreciation ability is different, and my appreciation ability is indeed limited. Maybe many people will like Brother Crocodile's rough and forthright singing, but there is no doubt that I really like the lyrics written by Brother Crocodile. Hearing this evaluation, Heir Xuejuan almost burst into tears. These words were too embarrassing. He thought he was right. His lips trembled and he said, I wrote the lyrics. I didn't write the lyrics at all. It was Yu Qianqiu, that bastard who had nothing better to do. I just borrowed it. As he said that, he raised his arms and shouted, Oh my God! I have no face to see anyone. I'm ashamed. I won't do such a shameful thing anymore. Then, with a slap, the strings of the zither broke and the zither was completely destroyed. Although Immortal Crocodile had always treated Ji Wu as a younger sister, she was still a beautiful woman. It was really shameful to be so shamelessly embarrassed in front of a beautiful woman. After smashing the zither, he covered his face with both hands and scolded himself. Ji Wu bent down to pick up a string, straightened it in her hand and murmured, I have a flower, the fragrance of the flowers fills the branches, who will sincerely seek its traces. Immortal Crocodile put down his hands and said in surprise, What did you say? Ji Wu was startled and then said with a smile, I said I couldn't tell, but I didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be such a talented guy. Sigh. Immortal Crocodile used both hands to push his messy silver hair to the back of his shoulders, shook his head and smiled bitterly. Not just you, I have been with him for so long and I can't tell. That time, after he was forced to show a little of his skills, I realized that this guy actually knows how to play with the instruments that women play with. But you don't say, even I, who don't understand music, think that the kid is really good at playing and singing. It's like the sound of heaven. At that time, I heard people say that he made a few songs, and each of them is a masterpiece of the world. Chapter 875. The song is the masterpiece of the human world? Jianghu smiled faintly. Brother, he really thinks highly of your little brother. Is it as exaggerated as you say? Xuanhuan waved his hand disapprovingly. Anyway, I have never heard such a beautiful song, but I can't help it if you don't believe me. Anyway, I can't say anything about this nonsense. He was too lazy to explain, but Jianghu seemed to be very interested. She wanted to get to the bottom of it. She smiled and said, "You and I have nothing to do. Why don't we have a chat? By the way, you said that Xianxia was forced to show his skills. What happened? Could it be that he could be forced to play the zither and compose the song?" "Ah, it's not the kind of coercion you said. It's like this." Xuanhuan still had a little conscience. He did not expose all of Xianxia's secrets. He only told the story of the day in Lingfang Valley. A love triangle story about Xianxia, Lu Yanqing, and when Lanfeng was talked about by him in his free time. After listening to the story, Jianghu understood the composition of the song. However, women seemed to be more interested in love stories. This was a common problem for women. She said suspiciously, "You mean that the woman named Lu Yanqing is the most beautiful woman in the world, and Lu Yanqing fell in love with Xianxia and expressed her love to him, but Xianxia politely refused?" Speaking of this, Xuanhuan suddenly slapped his thigh and laughed. He shook his head and said, "In fact, Lu Yanqing is really beautiful. She is not much inferior to you. In my opinion, she is just not as good as you in temperament. However, such a delicate beauty mustered up the courage to take the initiative to express her love, but she was rejected by that guy in such a straightforward way. Thinking about it, it's amazing." Jiwu's eyes flickered and said, "Straightforward way? What way?" Xuanhuan smirked and said, "That kid said that I'm a rough guy, and I'm more interested in the topic of having sex with women. I don't like the topic of flirting. You should talk to someone who understands." That brat patted his buttocks and left after he finished speaking. He really made us men proud, ha. He's more interested in the topic of going to bed with a woman. This brat is really a man among men, Halfway through his laughter, he suddenly couldn't laugh anymore. Only then did he realize that the person sitting opposite him was also a woman. He quickly cupped his hands in apology and said, "Sister, please don't blame me. I'm also a boorish man." Ji Wu's face was flushed, and she looked even more beautiful. She said mercilessly, "No man is good. I thought he was talented, but he's just a scum." Xuanhuan nodded and said, "Yes, yes, yes. How can that guy be called refined? It's best to describe him as scum. I've always disliked this guy. Scum, he's definitely scum. He's not a good person." However, even though Ji Wu scolded him, she asked, "Didn't you say that several of his songs in the human world are masterpieces? Even if you don't know how to sing them, you should remember the lyrics. Since we have nothing to do, why don't you read it to me?" "I really can't read this." Immortal Crocodile scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "I happened to be there just now. Because that kid's performance was so good, I couldn't help but remember it. The other masterpieces and so on are all from other people. I haven't heard them before, so I don't know if they're good or not." "I see." Ji Wu smiled casually, but there was a hint of disappointment in her bright eyes. Because the World Chamber of Commerce in Fantasy Immortal City was about to open, the preparation work became heavy. However, there were still some clues. Under Xikongju's suggestion, Xianxia sent Xikongju back and replaced him with his junior, Jing Yuankong. This was because when Yin Baikong was alive, Jing Yuankong was the main person in charge of the World Chamber of Commerce's business, while Xikongju was mostly in charge of external affairs. In terms of business management ability, Xikongju was indeed inferior to Jing Yuankong. After Jing Yuankong arrived, with Xianxia's full trust, he immediately adjusted the World Chamber of Commerce's operations in an orderly manner and started training the staff. As a result, the conference room on the 21st floor had a few meetings almost every day. Xianxia also learned like a good student, and the teacher was naturally Jing Yuankong. After a few business talks, everyone felt a little emotional. It was no wonder Yin Baikong could support such a huge World Chamber of Commerce in the human world. He was indeed good at doing business. However, Jing Yuankong told everyone that these were just some superficial things. Doing business was actually a very systematic knowledge. Experience was the foundation. Things that were too complicated were useless just by talking about it. Everyone had to integrate into it and put it into practice. Yu Qianqiu also didn't expect everyone here to become experts in making money for the World Chamber of Commerce. After all, the opening day was not far away. He mainly let Jing Yuankong teach everyone some business rules and instill the attitude that the customer is the immortal emperor. They shouldn't be used to being the overlord of a region and fight with the other party because they couldn't take it lying down. That would be a mess. Thus, Yu Qianqiu specially arranged for them to practice on the spot. One side would act as the bullied seller while the other side would act as the purposely difficult buyer. Wei Chuanxiu, who had always been following behind Yu Qianqiu, understood these people after a period of time and gradually felt that it was strange. He realized that although the people Yu Qianqiu recruited didn't seem to have much of a cultivation, they were all experts who could stand on their own. In terms of ability, they were definitely not the same cultivation disciples of the large sects or aristocratic families in the immortal world could compare to. If it wasn't for the fact that these people's cultivation were a little lacking, their ability to handle matters would definitely be comparable to some sect masters. They were all extremely slick and had very strong minds. They weren't like those itinerant cultivators who lived cautiously in the immortal world. No matter how you looked at them, they were all seasoned veterans. Especially after attending a few of Jing Yuankong's lessons, he felt that it was even more outrageous. This was simply a veteran who had experienced many battles in the business world. With such rich business experience, any sect would fight to have such a talent. Why was it a soul formation initial stage itinerant cultivator? Why would such talents flock to the World Chamber of Commerce? Wei Chuanxiu couldn't figure out the reason no matter how he racked his brains. He could only lament that there were indeed many outstanding people in the wilderness. No wonder the top experts in the immortal world were often itinerant cultivators and itinerant immortals. On the 25th of the month, the day that everyone anticipated the grand opening of the World Chamber of Commerce had finally arrived. The reason why everyone was looking forward to it wasn't because they wanted to show their support, but because they wanted to watch the show. Everyone seemed to have a premonition that the grand opening of the World Chamber of Commerce would definitely be a show to watch. And today's World Chamber of Commerce was indeed very lively. Because Yu Qianqiu's beliefs from his previous life were deeply ingrained, he really liked the festive feeling of a grand opening. He felt that red should be used today, a good beginning. Thus, long red banners hung down from the top of the World Chamber of Commerce's building. On the banners were some auspicious words to welcome guests from all over the world. As for sects that he was familiar with like Wangu Tong and Mythical Fire Palace, Yu Qianqiu went to visit them a day in advance. He shamelessly begged them to send a long red banner to congratulate him. Wang Yi and the others were rendered speechless by him. They had never seen such a thing before. However, they weren't forcing people to do something, so they all reluctantly sent a banner according to his request. Yu Qianqiu naturally accepted it with a chuckle. He then ordered people to hang the red banners of these large sects in the most conspicuous places of the building to show off their connections. Everyone in the World Chamber of Commerce was forced by him to wear a big red flower on their chests. He himself took the lead and put on a bright red robe. He stood at the door like a bridegroom, cupped his fists and smiled as he welcomed the guests. On the two sides of the door stood 8 people with big red flowers on their chests. They smiled awkwardly as they welcomed the guests. Even Wei Chuanxiu wasn't exempt. However, Wei Chuanxiu felt that the big red flower on his chest wasn't pleasing to the eye. He might as well put it on his back. The group of people couldn't understand. Was there any meaning in doing such a vulgar thing? Of course, there were also people who didn't wear big red flowers. They stood alone on the roof and silently watched Yin Peng below. He wasn't a member of the World Chamber of Commerce, so Yu Qianqiu couldn't force him. But then again, it did give people a very festive feeling. One look and you could tell that the World Chamber of Commerce was holding a joyous event. Not only that, the Wangu Tong sect, Fire Palace, Spirit Cultivation sect and Skyward Palace's red banners also caused the spectators to feel a sense of awe and respect. These 4 great sects were willing to hang out their banners to show their support, regardless of whether Yu Qianqiu had a deep relationship with them or not. In the eyes of the spectators, even if their relationship wasn't that deep, it didn't matter. But what most people didn't know was that these 4 banners were obtained by Yu Qianqiu shamelessly. Please, 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 please come in. Yu Qianqiu's face was a little dark as he squeezed out a smile and invited a guy he didn't know into the building. Even though he had decorated the opening ceremony to be very festive, there didn't seem to be many people coming in to support him. The number of people that went in wasn't even as many as the people he had set out to receive. But what made people's hair stand on end was that the people watching the show were densely packed in the air. Yu Qianqiu, who had been suppressing a bellyful of anger, really wanted to use his violet flame-flying sword to send out 10,000 swords at the same time, knocking down all the spectators and dragging them in. However, thinking was just thinking about it. So he could only comfort himself that this was just the beginning, the main character should still be behind. Whispers and laughter filled the air. Wei Chuanxiu walked out of the door with a big red flower on his back. He stared coldly at the people in the air who were laughing at him. The deterrence of an expert was still there. Under Wei Chuanxiu's threatening gaze, all of them shut up. After waiting for a while, Yu Qianqiu, who was wearing a festive red robe, also slowly walked out. He coldly looked around. He also felt that something was wrong. The few guests that went in couldn't even compare to him in cultivation and probably couldn't afford to buy anything. Wang Yi and the other 3 families should have come to support him, but none of them came. This matter was very strange. Chapter 876. He looked back at the banners hung by the 4 sects on the tall building. Since they were willing to give this, why didn't they come to support them? Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he looked at the people in the air. He could see a hint of mockery on their faces. Someone is playing tricks. This was Yu Qianqiu's first reaction. With this speculation, Yu Qianqiu's mind calmed down. He slowly walked into the building with his hands behind his back. In the center of the building's main hall was a pool made of jade. Yu Qianqiu sat at the edge of the pool while humming a little tune. He crossed his legs and looked at the small fish in the pool. From time to time, he would glance at the cultivators who were admiring the various immortal herbs. These people's cultivation levels weren't high. There was only one late-stage soul formation cultivator. They were all admiring the immortal herbs in the crystal cabinets in the hall with amazement. A few cultivators with big red flowers on their chests were eagerly introducing the immortal herbs to the people in the hall. The degree of emptiness at the opening was beyond everyone's expectations. However, there were a lot of people watching from the outside. The cold on the inside and the warm on the outside made everyone feel that something was wrong. Although the cultivators with big red flowers on their chests stood in their respective positions, they couldn't help but glance at Yu Qianqiu. They saw Yu Qianqiu leisurely sitting by the pool and humming a little tune. It was clear that he had a card up his sleeve. Everyone gradually calmed down. Lu Yanqing, who was guarding behind a large crystal cabinet, looked around and then looked at Yu Qianqiu. There was a faint trace of worry in her eyes. Even she could see that it wasn't easy to survive in the immortal realm. The deity transformation initial stage cultivator who had led them in had already browsed through all the immortal herbs on the 5th floor. Just as Yu Qianqiu had expected, the cultivator had only come in to look and had no intention of buying them. It seemed like he couldn't afford them and was walking out of the building, preparing to leave. When he passed by the pool, Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting with his legs crossed, suddenly shouted in an unfriendly tone, "Stop right there." Everyone in the hall stared at him. That person paused and cupped his hands at Yu Qianqiu. "Sect Master Yu, are you talking to me?" Yu Qianqiu stood up indifferently and walked in front of him. He said coldly, "Why did you steal my world commerce's immortal herbs?" When he said this, the lords in the hall quickly checked the crystal cabinets they were guarding. They found that none of the immortal herbs were missing. They looked at each other in confusion. That person's expression stiffened. When he saw everyone looking at him as if they were looking at a thief, he faintly felt that something was wrong. He immediately cupped his fists and explained, "Sect Master Yu, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. I didn't take anything from your merchant association. If Sect Master Yu doesn't believe me, you can check. I definitely don't have any immortal herbs on me." "You still dare to quibble? I said you stole it, so you stole it. Do you think I'm wrong?" Yu Qianqiu shouted coldly and extended a palm from his sleeve. The person in front of him immediately exploded into a cloud of white mist. The white mist was instantly sucked into Yu Qianqiu's sleeve. In the blink of an eye, that person turned into a sinister-looking mummy and was on the verge of collapsing. Yu Qianqiu waved his sleeve expressionlessly and a green flame swept the mummy up to the top of the pool. When the green flame returned to Yu Qianqiu's sleeve, the giant mummy had already turned into drifting ashes and fell into the pool, attracting the fish in the water to kiss the surface of the water. Everyone in the hall looked at each other. They finally saw the terror of the torture envoy again. However, they didn't know why Yu Qianqiu would suddenly kill him. Lu Yanqing bit her lip and stared at Yu Qianqiu. There was a hint of anger in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu coldly looked around and suddenly shouted, "Guard all the entrances and exits. Don't let a single one escape. If anyone dares to escape, kill them without mercy." He indifferently stared at the other cultivators who came in to watch. The various lords immediately guessed that Yu Qianqiu must have a reason for doing this. They quickly scattered and guarded the entrances and exits, staring at those people like tigers watching their prey. Those cultivators panicked and subconsciously gathered together, putting their backs against each other in a defensive position. Someone shouted, "Sect Master Yu, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this?" Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly as he walked towards them and said indifferently, "I just heard from outside that you were ordered by someone to deliberately cause trouble. As a result, those people outside were so scared that they didn't dare to come in." The various lords looked at each other again. This reason seemed too far-fetched. Based on these 5 people's cultivation, what trouble could they cause? With their cultivation they couldn't possibly scare the people outside. The person who shouted cupped his fists and said, "Sect Master Yu, someone is deliberately misleading us. How could the few of us come to World Commerce City to cause trouble? There is another reason why the people outside didn't come in. It has nothing to do with us. Please, Sect Master Yu, be magnanimous and let us leave." "So you're saying that someone is wrongly accusing you?" Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said indifferently, "I'm not an unreasonable person and I won't easily believe a one-sided story. I'll give you a chance to explain yourself. Then tell me, why didn't the people outside come in? Also, I'm warning you, don't try to fool me. Once I find out, I guarantee that none of you will leave alive." With that said, the various lords instantly understood. After going through so much trouble, this was their main goal, which was to find out the reason for this strange matter. They were all filled with admiration. The expressions of the people trapped also changed. They weren't idiots and naturally knew Yu Qianqiu's goal. Originally, some people were still holding on to a trace of hope. They thought that this was hallucinatory immortal city and Yu Qianqiu wouldn't dare to do anything to them. Otherwise, they would be severely punished by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. However, Yu Qianqiu had just come to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. He had made up a random excuse and killed the innocent person. They were extremely daring and simply disregarded the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. At this moment, everyone understood that the person from before didn't steal anything at all. Yu Qianqiu had killed him for everyone to see. After a moment of silence in the hall, Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "My patience is limited. I believe everyone has heard that the 30 disciples of the Heartless Palace all died in my hands in the ruins of God. Ask yourselves, how do you compare to them? I advise you to say it as soon as possible. Once I lose my patience, even if you want to say it, I might not want to hear it." Ruthless in the front and warning behind, forcing the few of them to have no way out. The cultivator who spoke to Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, "Sect leader Yu, this matter really has nothing to do with us. Before I came, I heard that in the morning before the World Commerce Alliance opened, the Heartless Palace's elder Feng Jiuru suddenly sent a message to the various sects managers, saying that if anyone dared to support the World Commerce Alliance, they would not give the Heartless Palace any face and would be going against the Heartless Palace. That's all I know." Sure enough, someone was playing tricks behind the scenes. The lords of the various countries all had stern looks in their eyes. Yu Qianqiu looked at the others expressionlessly and asked, "Is what he said true?" "That's what I've heard." "I've heard the same thing," a few people said one after another. "Yunnan Tian!" Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted. Yunnan Tian, who was dressed in a white cloak, responded and flashed over. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and said, "Even the loose cultivators here know about such a big thing, but we didn't hear anything. If this continues, we will be eaten by others sooner or later. From today onwards, I'll leave the matter of gathering information to you. If you have nothing to do, go out and take a stroll. In the future, when the conditions are right, you have to organize a group of people specifically in charge of this matter. Our world commerce cannot be blind or deaf. Got it?" Yunnan Tian clasped his hands angrily and said, "What should we do now? I'm just afraid that I don't know what happened. It'll be easier now that I know. Damn it, they're going too far. Do they think I'm made of clay? Just wait and see, you dog." Yu Qianqiu walked outside with large strides. "Sect Master Yu, can you let us go now?" the person who had spoken to Yu Qianqiu earlier asked. In the end, Yu Qianqiu shouted without even turning his head, "Don't leave a single one alive, kill." With this order, the trapped people immediately cried out in alarm. Someone shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, you despicable person, I'll fight you to the death." However, the lords of the various countries who were already boiling with murderous intent had already attacked first. Dozens of figures surrounded and attacked ruthlessly. In an instant, the hall was filled with the sounds of a fierce fight. With such a sudden commotion inside, the onlookers outside immediately knew that a fight had broken out. Before Yu Qianqiu could walk out of the door, Wei Chuanqiu, who was carrying a big red flower on his back, had already flashed in. Seeing the fight that had quickly ended inside, he said in shock, "What's going on?" Xianxia ignored him and walked to the area outside the door. He looked around coldly at the onlookers and shouted sternly, "Throw out the corpses for me." As soon as he finished speaking, a few mutilated and dismembered corpses were thrown out from inside. The onlookers floating in the air were instantly shocked. They didn't know what was going on with the World Commerce Association. Previously, when they were recruiting people, there had already been cases of people dying in a fight. Now, something like this happened again. Weren't they afraid that the Commerce Association Alliance would punish them severely? Wei Chuanxiu. Yu Qianxiu shouted again. With a flash of green light, Wei Chuanxiu had already landed beside him. Before the doubt on his face had disappeared, he saw Yu Qianxiu shout angrily at the crowd, "Heartless Palace's elder Feng Jiuru actually dared to openly send people to provoke our World Commerce Association in broad daylight. Smashing and robbing, committing all sorts of crimes. This is simply intolerable. This cannot be tolerated. Our World Commerce Association was forced to protect ourselves and had no choice but to kill. Bat King Wei, quickly go and invite the Commerce Association Alliance to uphold justice." How could this be? They're too daring. This heartless palace is too arrogant. The sounds of discussion in the air immediately became chaotic. Most of the people knew that Feng Jiuru had ordered the sects to blackmail them, so they were waiting here to watch the show. They wanted to see the World Commerce Association embarrass themselves. However, they didn't expect Feng Jiuru to be so daring. She actually sent people to smash and rob. This was a bit too much. Chapter 877. In everyone's eyes, World Chamber of Commerce was the weaker party compared to Heartless Palace. It was good enough that Heartless Palace didn't cause trouble for World Chamber of Commerce. At least for now, no one believed that Yu Qianxiu would confuse right and wrong to cause trouble for Heartless Palace. Therefore, after hearing Yu Qianxiu's indignant shout, everyone felt that Feng Jiuru had crossed the line. They all thought that Heartless Palace was too arrogant to cause trouble in hallucinatory Immortal City. This was a slap to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's face. For a moment, both in the open and in the dark, the comments condemning the Heartless Palace immediately caused an uproar, but no one suspected that Yu Qianxiu was talking nonsense. Feng Jiuru, that little bastard? Wei Chuanxiu glared at him and said angrily, "This is too much. I'll go kill him now." The old bat was also irritated by her words. With him here, Feng Jiuru, a junior, dared to come and make trouble. How could he be so shameless? "Stop." Yu Qianxiu grabbed Wei Chuanxiu, who didn't know the details, and said loudly, "They are the biggest sect in the immortal realm. They have the right to disregard the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's rules. But we don't have the right to be rude and unreasonable like them. Quickly go to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and ask someone to uphold justice." He secretly scolded, "Old bat, don't ruin my plan. Do as I say." Wei Chuanxiu was startled. Then he waved his sleeve and turned into a stream of light heading to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Yu Qianxiu's words caused the discussions in the surroundings to reach a climax. The Chamber of Commerce Alliance represented the Immortal Palace. Disregarding the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance was a huge accusation. If these words were to spread, it would be a headache for the Heartless Palace. Some people in the crowd had changed their expressions and retreated quietly. The people of World Chamber of Commerce also stood at the gate angrily to express their silent protest. Yu Nantian, who was beside Hu Changshou, slightly tilted his head and transmitted his voice, "Only the torture envoy dares to do such a big thing. If it were us, we would have to think twice." "That's right." Hu Changshou sent a telepathic message to Meng Qi. "The torturer is going to wrestle with the Heartless Palace. To be honest, I'm a little worried. After all, they're the #1 sect in the immortal world. What are you afraid of? At worst, we can just return to the human world. If we can't do it in the open, we can still have a chance to develop in the dark." Yu Nantian replied disapprovingly, "As for those individual cultivators just now, although you don't belong to any sect and neither side is involved, why did you come here for no reason? Alas, it's their bad luck to run into a torturer who doesn't play by the rules. I feel sorry for them." In the inner room of the Passionless Palace's branch, Feng Jiuru sat on the high seat, while the 4 leaders of the 4 islands of the lake, Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan sat on either side of her. The 4 of them were originally from the same sect, and the 4 islands of Lake Light were originally one family. Later on, because their master died at the hands of an enemy, a dispute arose between the 4 of them, and they all wanted to be the sect leader. As a result, a good sect was split into 4 and became 4 families. The 4 islands of Lake Light were within the main sphere of influence of the Passionless Palace, and they had always followed the Passionless Palace's lead. However, that didn't mean that they would throw away their lives. When they heard the summons, they hurried over. At first, they didn't know what it was for. When they arrived, Feng Jiru asked them perfunctorily, "Who is willing to snatch the territory of the world commerce?" When the 4 of them heard this, their expressions changed drastically. They weren't fools. The matter of Yu Qianqiu killing the disciples of the Passionless Palace in the ruins of God was already known to the world. It could be considered as a feud with the Passionless Palace. Coupled with the news that the world commerce was about to open, they immediately understood that the 4 of them were going to become tools for others to use. If it was to deal with an ordinary person, the 4 of them might fight to do it. With the support of the Passionless Palace, in addition to the fact that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation wasn't that great, they could also obtain a piece of land that was famous in the immortal world. It could be said to be a wonderful job. However, this Yu Qianqiu wasn't ordinary. He had the Green Wing Bat King and the White Cloud Mountain Master by his side. If they really snatched Yu Qianqiu's territory, then they might as well hide in the illusory immortal city for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, how would the 2 early-stage immortal emperor experts let them off? No matter how good the territory was, it wasn't as important as their own lives. No matter how Feng Jiru talked, the 4 of them were still vaguely unwilling to nod in agreement. Seeing that the soft approach didn't work, Feng Jiru didn't hold back anymore. She directly used a hard threat and said bluntly, "Everyone, we have no choice in this matter. If those 2 old monsters want to kill you, my Passionless Palace is still confident that we can protect you. However, if my Passionless Palace wants to kill you, those 2 old monsters definitely won't be able to protect you. Everyone better think clearly. Don't do things that you shouldn't have done." Since she had already said it to this point, the 4 of them really had no choice but to reluctantly agree. However, they had a stomach full of complaints. "Since your Passionless Palace isn't afraid of those 2 old monsters, why did you still ask us to torment you? Can't your Passionless Palace handle it yourself?" What they didn't know was that this matter was completely done by Feng Jiru herself. It wasn't a decision made by the upper echelons of Passionless Palace. With Feng Jiru's late-stage great immortal cultivation, let alone 2 old monsters, any old monster would be able to kill him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have so many scruples. Now, Feng Jiru wanted to do a better job and show off her abilities so that the higher-ups would think highly of her. In addition, she saw that the 4 of them were not very determined, so she wanted to show off the might of the Heartless Palace. Thus, before the World Commerce Association opened, she sent a message to the sects, advising them not to support the World Commerce Association. Otherwise, they would be going against Passionless Palace. At this time, the news that came back from time to time showed that the sects were indeed afraid of Passionless Palace's power. No one dared to support the World Commerce Association. Feng Jiru proudly boasted to the sect masters. Her disciple Sun Luan also flattered her from time to time. The 4 sect masters were secretly shocked. They didn't expect Passionless Palace to be so powerful. It was far beyond their expectations. A simple warning was enough to make the sects in the immortal world not dare to act recklessly. Thus, the 4 of them slowly smiled and flattered her. At this moment, the disciple who had happily delivered the news suddenly stood outside and shouted for Branch Master. Sun Luan was slightly surprised when he saw this. He cupped his fists at the few people and came out to send a voice transmission to that disciple. Did something happen? That disciple hurriedly told him about what happened to the World Commerce Association. Sun Luan was a little confused after hearing it. He immediately felt that his master was overconfident and caused trouble. Originally, he didn't think that there was a need to waste effort on a Yu Qianqiu. If there was a decree from the upper echelons, then it was a different matter. There was no need to find trouble for himself. Go back and keep an eye on them. Sun Luan waved the disciple away. He felt that the situation was serious and he couldn't hide it anymore. He immediately returned to Feng Jiru's side and told her what happened. The smile on Feng Jiru's face slowly froze. The 4 island sect masters looked at each other, not knowing what happened to make this confident elder lose her composure. Feng Jiru, who was stunned for a moment, suddenly smashed the newly changed tea table into pieces. She stood up and shouted angrily, "How dare you slander this old man? Come, follow me to see." In the inner room of the Wangu Tong branch, Wangi, Huofeng, Dunanshan, and Yadonglu were all seated. Not only them, there were a few more people. Master Ya and Shui Mingqing, Huo Lianqing and Hui Yunlong, Du Kairan and Du Feng, and Wan Ling were also in the room. The last 3 pairs of master and disciple or father and son, had taken the initiative to come to the sect to congratulate the opening of World Commerce Firm. It could be said that they were prepared to give Xianxia a great deal of face. Huo Lianqing and the others hadn't expected Xianxia's momentum to develop so fiercely. He had actually managed to establish a world commerce firm on his own and had even made quite a name for himself. They were acutely aware that this was a good opportunity because Xianxia had a good relationship with their sons or disciples. If they could use this opportunity to raise the status of world commerce firm, as long as Xianxia wasn't stupid, he would appreciate this favor and naturally deepen his relationship with their sons or disciples. This was undoubtedly beneficial to Xianxia, but it was also very beneficial to the juniors like Hui Yunlong. For these juniors, the competition within the sect was fierce. If they were on the same starting line as their peers in the sect, they would already have a close relationship with the sect leaders of other sections. This was definitely something that would give them extra points in the sect. If World Commerce Firm's status in the immortal world was higher, Hui Yunlong and the others who had a good relationship with sect master Xianxia would naturally stand out among their peers in the sect. This problem seemed complicated, but it was actually very simple. For example, the position of deacon in Chaotian Palace would be given to anyone with similar conditions. There was a time when they needed to purchase some urgently needed immortal herbs and World Commerce Firm happened to be selling them. However, World Commerce Firm purposely raised the price or didn't want to sell them. Because Shui Mingqing had a good relationship with World Commerce Firm's sect master Xianxia, Chaotian Palace sent Shui Mingqing to talk to Xianxia. Xianxia finally sold the immortal herbs to Chaotian Palace for the sake of their friendship. Chaotian Palace benefited from this, so they naturally had to look up to Shui Mingqing. Like Master Ya and the others, they wouldn't give up an opportunity to help their son and disciple pave the way, so this group of people came. Wanling was different from everyone else. She was forced to come by her grandfather. A group of people were originally going to World Commerce Firm to congratulate them, but who knew that Feng Jiuru would suddenly issue a warning? As a result, a group of people postponed the congratulation. As a result, they gathered together and waited for a while. It wasn't that they were afraid of Feng Jiuru, but they wanted to see how Xianxia would deal with this. If Xianxia couldn't even get past this, they wouldn't go to congratulate him. Although they weren't afraid of Heartless Palace, there was no need to offend Heartless Palace for a useless person. Feng Jiuru was actually certain of this. She predicted that everyone wouldn't offend Heartless Palace for a mere Xianxia, so she dared to be so arrogant. Chapter 878. In reality, Wang Yi didn't want to care about Feng Jiuru's *T warning. As the largest chamber of commerce in the immortal realm, it wasn't far from the Heartless Palace. Most importantly, Wan Bushing had told him that he couldn't treat Xianxia lightly. However, unexpectedly, Wan Ling stopped him from congratulating and told him to wait and follow the crowd. They would do what everyone else did. Wang Yi thought it was strange, but he knew that Wan Ling was sent by Wan Bushing. She was the one who could make the decision. As for the reason, only Wan Ling knew. She didn't like the Heartless Palace for a long time, but she didn't expect the Heartless Palace to make a move on the secret agent sent by the Immortal Emperor. She was delighted and looked forward to the scene of the Immortal Palace taking care of the Heartless Palace. The elders sat across from each other and chatted casually. The younger ones were polite and answered questions. Du Feng, Hui Yunlong, and Shui Mingqing were much more casual with each other because the three of them were friends. However, the three of them were much more polite to Wan Ling. They all remembered how Wan Ling had held Xianxia's hand in front of everyone. They didn't know what the relationship between her and Xianxia was. Although these people stayed here, they never stopped receiving news from the outside. They were always aware of the World Chamber of Commerce's movements. If there was anyone who was really worried about Xianxia, it was probably Shui Mingqing because he vaguely knew that there was an unknown power behind Xianxia that would be of great help to his future development. Once he left Xianxia's help, it wouldn't be long before the fake halo above his head was exposed. At that time he would lose his foothold in Skyward Palace. Therefore, after Shui Mingqing knew that Feng Jiuru was going to deal with Xianxia, he was very anxious. He was a little distracted when he talked to everyone. Just as everyone was patiently waiting, the latest news about the World Chamber of Commerce arrived. All the disciples told them about Xianxia's furious actions in detail. After they heard the latest news, all of them looked at each other with dumbstruck expressions, and Wang Yi said with astonishment, "This Xianxia is quite audacious to kill people in Illusory City again. But this Feng Jiuru is even more daring. She actually dares to openly smash and rob in the World Commerce Association. She really doesn't place the rules of the Commerce Association alliance in her eyes." Sitting cross-legged opposite him, Yadonglu slowly shook his head and muttered, "Why do I feel that something is wrong? Feng Jiru might be arrogant, but she was not arrogant enough to go against the immortal palace, was she? Openly smashing and robbing in the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce? Unbelievable. What's so unbelievable about that? That guy is too arrogant. Otherwise, why would he do something like warning the sects? Does he really think that his heartless palace has the final say in the immortal world?" Huofeng chuckled and said, "Normally, small sects would be afraid of heartless palace's power and wouldn't dare to make a sound. But this Yu Qianzhou is quite interesting. He's a person who can't tolerate sand in his eyes. Feng Jiru sent people to provoke him, but he was even more ruthless. He didn't place heartless palace in his eyes at all. He directly killed the people Feng Jiru sent, and still wants to complain to the Commerce Association Alliance. This time, Feng Jiru is playing with thorns. This Yu Qianzhou is not to be trifled with. I'm afraid he'll ruthlessly bite him, enough to make him suffer." Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. At this time, Du Kairen stood up and said to Du Feng, "We should go congratulate that friend of yours for opening his business." Yafuzi also stood up and said, "That's right. Yu Qianzhou is alone and weak. He needs someone to support him lest someone bullies him." They laughed again and left one after another for the World Commerce Association. However, Wangi, Huofeng, Yadonglu, and Du Nanshan didn't go. Since their respective sects had sent representatives, there was no need for them to join in the fun. Instead, they returned to their own territories. Yu Qianzhou stood alone in front of the World Commerce Association's building with his hands behind his back. He stood there motionlessly, his slightly closed eyes flashing from time to time. His big red robe was exceptionally eye-catching. "Get out of the way." An angry shout came. The crowd of onlookers in the air suddenly quietened down and made way for him. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and saw 6 people standing in the crowd that had parted. 2 blue-clothed men were at the front, and the elder in the lead pointed at him and shouted angrily, "You are Yu Qianzhou?" Yu Qianzhou's brows moved slightly, vaguely guessing who it was. He immediately sneered and said, "You're that old man Feng Jiru who deliberately made life difficult for my World Commerce Association? How dare you?" Sun Luan shouted. Feng Jiru was so angry that she laughed and said, "What an arrogant brat." The master and disciple landed in front of Yu Qianzhou. Feng Jiru pointed at the mutilated corpse on the ground and said aggressively, "Why are you framing this old man?" Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "I'm framing you? Damn it. I didn't even know who you were before this. I was even eager to avoid your heartless palace. It's more like I have nothing better to do. Only a ghost would frame you." The surrounding people nodded inwardly, deeply agreeing with Yu Qianzhou's words. Unless Yu Qianzhou was tired of living, he wouldn't deliberately frame Feng Jiru. The news that Feng Jiru had released against Yu Qianzhou was true. The lords crowded at the entrance of the World Commerce Association building were sweating in their palms. What if they angered the other party by spouting nonsense so unscrupulously? Feng Jiru suddenly realized that she was too agitated and had lost her poise. She immediately took a deep breath and calmed herself down. She took a step forward and said arrogantly, "Brat, it's impossible to get away with making irresponsible remarks. This old man isn't that easy to frame. If you can't produce evidence, then shut up. Otherwise you'll have to bear the consequences." "Old man, how dare you threaten me in front of so many people? Do you think the World Commerce Association is run by your heartless palace?" Yu Qianzhou retorted, almost spitting at the other party's face. Seeing that the other party was about to flip out again, he immediately waved his hand and shouted, "Before the World Commerce Association sends someone over, I have the right to remain silent. The World Commerce Association will decide what's right and wrong. I won't keep you company." He flicked his sleeve and turned to leave. "Stop right there," Feng Jiru shouted. No soul formation cultivator had ever dared to speak to her like this. She had just calmed herself down, but she instantly exploded again. In the end, Yu Qianzhou shouted even louder than her. He turned around and pointed at Feng Jiru's nose and roared, "This is my territory. If you don't want to stay, then scram. Anyway, shut up. I'm warning you, old man. If you dare to threaten me again, I will treat your threat as a serious provocation under the watchful eyes of everyone. I have the right to launch a counterattack, and when that happens, the responsibility will not be on me." There was an uproar in the air. Everyone felt that Yu Qianzhou had gone too far. Feng Jiru also laughed and said disdainfully, "Then I'd like to see how you're going to fight back." Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and turned to the top of the building. He cupped his hands and shouted, Mountain Master Bai Yun, thank you. As soon as he finished speaking, a white light landed beside him. A pair of sharp eyes stared at Feng Jiuru. As soon as Yun Peng appeared, the entire place fell silent. Feng Jiuru's pupils contracted as if someone had grabbed her by the neck. She couldn't say a word. Only then did everyone remember. How could they have forgotten about this person? This guy was famous for being a cold-faced killer many years ago. He was much colder than the green-winged Bat King. How about I kill you? Yun Peng asked simply. His sharp eyes shone with a cold light as he stared at Feng Jiuru. Feng Jiuru's expression froze. She cupped her hands and said awkwardly, so it's Mountain Master Bai Yun. Please forgive me. How about I kill you? Yun Peng asked simply again. Even though it was the same question, everyone shuddered. They suddenly felt like Yun Peng was like a half-drawn sword. He began to emit a faint killing intent, and the surrounding temperature dropped slightly. Feng Jiuru slowly retreated with a stiff expression. Mountain Master Bai Yun, my heartless palace doesn't seem to have any grudges with you. Why do you have to bully us? Her disciple, Sun Luan, also retreated with a pale face. Yu Qianzhou looked at Yun Peng with admiration. He thought to himself, so it's more frightening when you speak in a straightforward manner. Stop. A cold shout suddenly reverberated in the air. For streams of light descended and appeared. Wei Chuanxiu walked out from the group of four and came to Yu Qianzhou's side. He pointed at the thin golden-robed man and said, I've invited the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's great bright wheel-bearer to uphold justice. Yu Qianzhou immediately bowed. He had heard of this man but had never seen him. He knew that this man was the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's leader. After Yun Peng and the thin man exchanged a glance, they turned into streams of light and returned to the World Commerce Alliance's rooftop. It was obvious that Yun Peng was unwilling to face this man. Feng Jiuru heaved a sigh of relief. She quickly cupped her hands and bowed to the thin man. Greetings, great bright wheel-bearer. Sun Luan also bowed. When Wei Chuanxiu saw Feng Jiuru, he immediately pointed at her and shouted, Little B****, how dare you jump on my head? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have let you go back then. I would have killed you directly. Everyone immediately heard a story from his words. The corner of Feng Jiuru's mouth twitched. Seeing the great bright wheel beside her, she knew that nothing would happen. She immediately gathered her courage and shouted, Bat King Wei, please watch your mouth. Wow. Now it's terrible. Wei Chuanxiu let out a strange cry. He flipped his claws out of his sleeves and disappeared on the spot. As Feng Jiuru turned pale with fright, she saw the great bright wheel's golden sleeve point out 2 fingers, and a dazzling silver plate with a diameter of 2 meters suddenly appeared from the fingertips, like a bright moon protecting Feng Jiuru. Dong. A muffled sound rang out. Although it was not loud, it seemed to pierce through everyone's eardrums, causing them to tremble and go limp. The silver plate suddenly flashed with a strong white light, bouncing back a green light. When the green light appeared, Wei Chuanxiu could not control his body and slid backward. His feet were like iron plows creating a deep ravine. Chapter 879. A white light flashed and the bright moon disappeared. Deming Luan said indifferently, Wei Chuanxiu, do you think I'm a decoration? Wei Chuanxiu waved his sleeves and forcefully stopped. His thighs had already sunk into the ground. Then he jumped out and pointed at Feng Jiuru. Deming Luan, this bastard sent people to World Commerce Hall to smash and rob and you didn't care. Instead you attacked me. Is this the rule of your Commerce Hall alliance? Deming Luan crossed his sleeves over his stomach and said indifferently, if you want to solve it yourself, why did you have to drag me out? Wei Chuanxiu's neck thickened and he wanted to argue, but he was pulled back by Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou pointed at the trench in the ground and said painfully, who did I offend? There are always people coming to make trouble when I establish World Commerce Hall. It's fine if Heartless Palace came to make trouble, but why did you join in as well? A good piece of land was turned into this by you. Are you going to pay for the repair? Wei Chuanxiu's expression froze and he said in shock, look at the situation now, you still care about this little bit of money? Everyone was speechless. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and said, if it wasn't for money, why would I waste so much effort to establish this commerce hall? At this time there was a slight commotion in the crowd in the air. Several figures landed on the ground. They were none other than the representatives sent by Wan Gu Tong and the other 3 sects, Wan Ling and Du Kairen, who brought their disciples. World Commerce Hall's opening has alarmed Deming Luan's representative? Du Kairen said in surprise. He had already cupped his hands in greeting. He wasn't pretending to be surprised, but he really didn't expect the representative of the Commerce Hall Alliance to come. The others also followed suit and saluted. However, their attention was soon attracted by the exposed corpses on the ground. They looked at Yu Qianshou with complicated expressions. Deming Luan nodded slightly and said, "What are you four sects doing here? Are you here to congratulate the opening of World Commerce Hall?" Du Karen's representative answered, "Manager is wise, we are here to congratulate Yu Qianshou on the opening of the World Chamber of Commerce." The others also nodded in agreement. When he said this, the expressions of everyone present varied. The Deming Luan looked at Yu Qianshou with deep meaning. Feng Jiru, on the other hand, had a gloomy expression on her face as she kept her mouth shut. It was obvious that these families were not giving her any face. Yu Qianshou immediately cupped his hands and laughed. "Welcome. Welcome. A warm welcome. Please come inside. I will go and thank you after I have settled a small matter here. Wuchangshou Yunantian, come and entertain the guests." While speaking, he nodded to Shui Mingqing and the other friends. The gate, which was blocked by the lords of the kingdoms, was suddenly empty. The two groups of people with big red flowers on their chests formed an 8 shape again. Wuchangshou and Yunantian came together and waved their hands to invite the guests. Huolianqing waved his hand and said, "There's no need to stand on ceremony. Since it is just a small matter, it is fine for us to wait." Yu Qianshou, why did people die here? What exactly happened? This question was a little fake. Everyone knew that these people couldn't possibly not know what happened here. Yu Qianshou chuckled and said, "My World Commerce Association is opening for business today, and a few scum who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth suddenly came to my place to smash and rob. I naturally couldn't sit by idly and immediately took countermeasures. Who knew that these people couldn't take a beating and spilled everything in order to save their lives? So there is a mastermind behind this. Such a thing actually happened in the hallucinatory immortal city?" Yafuzi looked at Yu Qianshou with a frown and said, "Who is the mastermind? Who is so daring? They simply don't put the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance in their eyes." Yu Qianshou opened his claw and took a head from the ground into his hand. He lifted it up and said, "This person said that they were sent by Feng Jiru, the elder of Heartless Palace." "Nonsense!" Feng Jiru immediately roared and defended herself. "Don't listen to his nonsense. This brat is deliberately framing me. I didn't do such a thing at all." Deming Luan said calmly, "Since you didn't do it, then let him finish. The truth can't be faked, the lies can't be true. No one can frame you." Once he spoke, Feng Jiru immediately lost her temper. She could only grit her teeth and stare at Yu Qianshou. Yu Qianshou coughed and continued while holding the head. He said that Feng Jiru, the elder of Heartless Palace, was not only the mastermind behind this matter, but also the one who caused trouble during my World Chamber of Commerce's recruitment last time. He also said that not only that, Feng Jiru also sent a warning letter to the various sects, threatening them not to come and support my World Chamber of Commerce. She wants to make a fool out of us. Just as he finished speaking, he heard Du Kairen sneer and say, "I don't know about the other things, but Elder Feng sent a warning letter to my spirit cultivation sect. I can testify to this. As for whether or not he warned the other sects, we'll have to ask everyone. My Skyward Palace also received Elder Feng's warning," Yafuzi said indifferently. Huolianqing nodded and said, "My Mythical Fire Palace also received it." Wanling cupped her fists and smiled. "Elder Feng also took care of my Wangu Tong." After these people interjected for a while, the onlookers immediately sighed. This undoubtedly proved that Feng Jiru was the one who did all these things, and they all thought that Feng Jiru was going to be in trouble this time. Feng Jiru's expression also changed greatly. She realized that sending a warning letter to the various sects was indeed too stupid. For a moment, she was very nervous and couldn't help but secretly observe the changes in Deming Luan's expression. Wei Chuanxiu stared at Feng Jiru with a sneer. Although Yu Qianshou had a sincere expression, he was also gloating in his heart. He thought to himself, "This is the result of provoking me." However, to everyone's surprise, Deming Luan looked around and said, "I've also heard about Feng Jiru sending a letter to threaten the various sections. Moreover, there are so many witnesses it seems like it's not fake. The conflict between your sects and the various merchant houses has never stopped. It's normal for threats to come and go. As long as you don't violate the rules of the illusionary immortal city, my merchant house alliance won't interfere. If we want to interfere, we will only interfere with those who brazenly violate the rules." Yu Qianshou. Yu Qianshou was pondering what these words meant when he suddenly heard someone calling him. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Here." Other than your world merchant house's people, did anyone else see these dead people smashing and robbing in your world merchant house? Deming Luan asked. Yu Qianzhou was startled and felt that something was wrong. He looked around and it seemed too late to find an outsider to testify. He gritted his teeth and replied, I don't know if anyone else saw it. I'm afraid that even if someone saw it, they would be afraid of Heartless Palace's despotic power and wouldn't dare to stand out to testify. Deming Luan lowered his eyes and sighed softly. Since there are no outsiders to testify, why did you kill all these people? Even if only one was left alive, he would be a good witness. Now that there are no witnesses, do you want me to believe your world merchant house's side of the story? As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately felt the wind change. Feng Jiru's expression was somewhat overjoyed. She didn't know why this person in charge of the Merchant House Alliance wanted to help her. They had never interacted before. Could it be that he had a deep relationship with the sect? At this point, Deming Luan's calm tone suddenly became stern. In the future, don't bother me with things without evidence. I'm not a selfless judge and don't have the time to distinguish right from wrong. My Merchant House Alliance knows what to do. Now that someone has pulled me here, I can't just go back without doing anything. Because what I'm seeing now is someone brazenly violating the Merchant House Alliance's rules. Yu Qianzhou, how dare you kill people in hallucinatory Immortal City twice in a row? Are you looking down on my Merchant House Alliance's rules? Everyone was silent. Du Kairin and the others who had come to see Feng Jiru's misfortune were all stunned. Feng Jiru's spirits rose. She didn't expect that she would gain the upper hand in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianzhou was a little dumbfounded. How did the ending turn out like this? He immediately cupped his hands and explained, Leader is wise. My world merchant house only wants to do business honestly. However, the wind won't stop when the tree desires peace. Seeing that someone has come to kill my world merchant house, can't my world merchant house protect itself? Did I say that you can't protect yourself? On Deming Luan's thin face, under his thick eyebrows, his eyelids flickered with a bright light. He said in an imposing manner, You have Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng here. Is there a need to kill a few soul formation cultivators? You don't even want to leave any evidence that's beneficial to you. Do you want my Merchant House Alliance to work for you? Do you think the Merchant House Alliance is something you can order around? Ask the entire immortal world if there's such a good thing? His words made Yu Qianzhou speechless. He could see that Feng Jiru had already made up his mind. No matter how glib your tongue was, Feng Jiru had everything under his control. The situation was completely under his control. It was useless no matter how you tried to reason with him. Feng Jiru had absolute strength. If he said that Yu Qianzhou was wrong, then Yu Qianzhou was wrong. If he said that Feng Jiru was wrong, then she definitely couldn't be right either. This was what it meant to be a king. All ghosts and monsters couldn't withstand a single blow. But this way Wei Chuanxiu couldn't take it anymore. He shouted, Deming Luan, according to what you said, we can't get away with killing people in self-defense? Deming Luan looked at him and said indifferently, Since there is indeed a reason for this, I won't pursue it. But he suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at the crowd. If anyone dares to disregard the rules of the Merchant House Alliance again, I don't care who is right or wrong, I will punish them severely. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly in his heart. What a powerful guy. He and Feng Jiru had been arguing for a long time, but neither of them had gained the upper hand. Instead, he had let everyone see his majesty and took the opportunity to warn everyone. Wei Chuanxiu, who was ready to argue with Deming Luan, was also speechless. He didn't expect Deming Luan to pick it up and then put it down gently. He was so angry that he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't say what he wanted to say to Feng Jiru with Deming Luan. Chapter 880. She didn't even look for your World Chamber of Commerce to settle the score, so how could you expect her to look for Feng Jiru? Wei Chuanxiu stared at the big Ming Luan, the mustache on his lips trembling. He then raised his head to look at Yun Peng, who had left the building as soon as possible. He realized that Yun Peng was still the smart one, trying his best not to interact with the big Ming Luan. At this moment, a flying shuttle flying above the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce attracted everyone's attention. The flying shuttle slowly descended, and on it stood two golden-robed men and a petite beautiful woman. Yu Qianzhou, who had been tormented to the point of losing his temper, was slightly startled. He couldn't help exchanging glances with Shui Mingqing and the others because the woman standing on the flying shuttle was none other than Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. When Mu Tianjiao saw Yu Qianzhou, she smiled sweetly and nodded. Her gaze fell on the corpse on the ground and she couldn't help but be stunned. When she saw that there were people wearing the clothes of the immortal palace present, she was even more baffled. After the three of them got off the flying shuttle, one of the golden-robed men whispered a few words to Mu Tianjiao, while the other quickly put away the flying shuttle. The three of them walked together to the Great Bright Wheel and saluted, "Greetings, Great Bright Wheel Bearer." Deming Luan nodded slightly and looked at Mu Tianjiao suspiciously. "This young lady looks unfamiliar. May I know who you are?" There were too many people in the immortal palace. He didn't even know who the two golden-robed men were, let alone Mu Tianjiao, because he had never seen her before. "This junior is Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce." Mu Tianjiao bowed respectfully. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings immediately became restless. It turned out that this woman was the woman of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong. Those who didn't know her immediately memorized Mu Tianjiao's appearance so that they wouldn't do anything stupid in the future. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng's expressions were somewhat bitter. "Oh." Deming Luan immediately understood and said with a faint smile, "So it is Wu Xiong's wife, there is no need to say junior. Wu Xiong and I have a close relationship and we are all on the same side. If you continue to call yourself junior, Wu Xiong will realize that he is a generation lower than you and will not be happy." "Why are you here?" A complicated look flashed across Mu Tianjiao's eyes. She cupped her hands and said, "Yu Qianqiu and I are friends. I heard that the World Chamber of Commerce is opening, so I came to congratulate you." Hearing this, many people felt a chill in their hearts. They no longer dared to look down on Yu Qianqiu. This Yu Qianqiu had undoubtedly formed a relationship with Wu Xiong. Deming Luan was startled. After sizing up Yu Qianqiu, he smiled and said, "Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. When you have time, come visit the Chamber of Commerce Alliance." After greeting them, he glanced at Wei Chunqiu and left with his two subordinates. As soon as he left, the oppressive atmosphere immediately became relaxed. Yu Qianqiu winked at Hu Changqiu and Yu Nantian, and the two of them immediately went to deal with the bodies on the ground. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his hands at the people who came to congratulate him. "Thank you for your support. Please come in." The few of them looked at Mu Tianjiao, wanting her to leave first. Although her cultivation wasn't much, her current status was extraordinary. Mu Tianjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. She took out a gift box from her storage bracelet and offered it to him. "This is a small token of my appreciation. I wish Sect Master you luck in opening the Chamber of Commerce." "I spent a lot of money, a lot of money." Yu Qianqiu smiled as he received it with both hands. He inadvertently touched a few of Mu Tianjiao's fingers. He didn't feel anything, but Mu Tianjiao's hand trembled slightly. Just as Yu Qianqiu stuffed the gift box into his storage pouch, Wanling also came over with a gift box. She said with a smile, "Just a little something. Sect Master Yu, the World Chamber of Commerce's business is booming." Then Shui Mingqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng also presented their congratulatory gifts. Yu Qianqiu smiled like a flower and thanked them profusely. "You're too polite. Please come in. Everyone please come in." He waved his hand and impolitely stuffed the gifts into his storage pouch. Under his guidance, the people who came to congratulate him stepped into the building curiously. Wei Chuanqiu didn't leave. He stared at Feng Jiuru and warned her with a voice transmission, "You're lucky today. If you have the ability, you can hide in the hallucinatory immortal city for the rest of your life. If you dare to take one step out of the hallucinatory immortal city, I'll immediately cut off your head to use as a cushion." Feng Jiuru's expression was dark and gloomy as she gritted her teeth. She had lost a lot of face today and had undoubtedly lost the face of the Heartless Palace. If the sect got wind of this, they would inevitably be out of luck. Not only that, Wei Chuanqiu just had to threaten to kill her. Since that was the case, no one would have an easy time. Feng Jiuru slowly put her hands behind her back. Her gaze swept across the 4 islands sect masters in the sky and she calmly transmitted her voice to them. "Now it's your turn to make a move. Whoever kills Yu Qianqiu can obtain this territory. My Heartless Palace will also strongly support his development." Lan Hao and the other 3 looked at each other with an indescribably bitter expression. Everyone had seen everything that had just happened. Even Feng Jiuru herself couldn't do anything to the World Chamber of Commerce, so what could they do? That's right, the rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance allowed a sect master to challenge another sect master. But if they really did such a thing, judging from Wei Bat King's temper, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Excluding this point, even Wu Xiong's wife had come to support Yu Qianqiu. Could they afford to offend such a person? What? Are you afraid or do you want to go back on your word? Feng Jiuru warned sternly. Either you didn't agree to me in the first place, or don't even think about going back on your word. Otherwise, don't even think about returning to the 4 islands of Lake Light. I'll send people to take good care of your families. This was a naked threat. The 4 of them were shocked when they heard this. Lan Hao replied angrily, Elder Feng, aren't you going too far by doing this? Is this your personal intention or the intention of the Heartless Palace? Heartless Palace is the #1 sect in the immortal world. I've never heard of Heartless Palace using other people's families to threaten people. There aren't many reasons. Feng Jiuru indifferently said, if anyone can kill Yu Qianshou while challenging him, not only can they obtain this mountain, I will also do my best to facilitate the unification of the 4 islands of Lake Light. From then on, there will only be one sect master in charge of the 4 islands of Lake Light. That's all I have to say. Do as you see fit. As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Jiuru suddenly looked into the sky. She saw figures landing one after another. Judging by their clothes, they were obviously disciples from various sections. She even knew many of them. They were all walking towards the entrance of the World Commerce Association. The 2 rows of people at the entrance with big red flowers on their chests hurriedly welcomed them. Feng Jiuru was so angry that she almost vomited blood. This was called a broken drum beating. Those sects who were watching at first saw that the World Commerce Association had stabilized the situation and immediately came to join in the fun. Every time they went to a sect, it was undoubtedly a slap to Feng Jiuru's face. Feng Jiuru angrily stared at the 4 sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Inside the lobby, there was a pool decorated with mountain spring water. There were fluorescent stones at the bottom of the pool, allowing people to clearly see the small fish swimming in it. There were crystal counters all around. All kinds of immortal herbs lay quietly inside. There were also fluorescent stones placed sporadically in the cabinets. It looked very beautiful. Yu Qianshou used the layout of the exhibition hall from his previous life. He especially strengthened the lighting effect created by the fluorescent stones. Those who had never come in before would have their eyes light up when they saw it for the first time. This kind of environment was the most attractive to women. Wan Ling and Mu Tianjiao's eyes lit up when they walked in. They kept shaking their heads as they looked around. Every time they walked in front of a crystal cabinet, the 2 girls' attention wasn't on the immortal herbs inside. Instead, they were more focused on admiring the psychedelic colors reflected by the fluorescent stones and the crystal cabinet. The only fly in the ointment was that there had been some fighting in the lobby. Some places had already been damaged, but they had already been cleaned up. A few of the men who had come to support Yu Qianshou saw the decorations inside, and their expressions became solemn. They could all see the value of this place, and it would definitely increase people's desire to buy it. Thus, they began to carefully observe every layout in the building. The desire to learn was in their eyes. You made the decorations here? Mu Tianjiao asked Yu Qianshou, who was leading the way and introducing the place. The entire World Commerce Chamber of Commerce worked together. Yu Qianshou said disapprovingly as they walked. Mu Tianjiao didn't think that his subordinates would have such foresight. She smiled and said, I really couldn't tell. First there were waterfalls, then there were tall buildings, and now there are these attractive decorations. You really are extraordinary. Yu Qianshou casually said a few polite words and laughed it off. However, it was precisely because of this conversation that Mu Tianjiao took a few more glances at his subordinates. She immediately discovered that many of them were acquaintances she had seen before. This discovery surprised Mu Tianjiao a little because she had seen some of them in the Divine Ruin realm. Weren't they people that Shui Mingqing had gathered from various sects to help? How did they become Yu Qianshou's subordinates? Shui Mingqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng didn't pay attention at first. As faces flashed past their eyes, they gradually recognized some people. The 2 of them looked at each other in dismay. Shui Mingqing was a little nervous, afraid of being exposed. Fortunately, neither Wan Ling nor Master Ye knew these people. Yu Qianshou had just led these people to the staircase and was about to take them to the 2nd floor to continue their tour when they suddenly heard a faint voice saying welcome from outside. Everyone stopped and looked over. They saw a large group of people walking in. After coming in, they began to look at the crystal cabinets. They didn't look like people who were going to cause trouble. Wu Lianqing laughed and said, It seems that all the sects have sent people to support us. I reckon that Feng Jiuru's expression isn't good right now. Who knew that just as he finished speaking, a loud shout suddenly came from outside, Yu Qianshou, come out! Yu Qianshou, come out! It was shouted several times in a row. It seemed that several people were shouting at the same time, causing the lobby to reverberate continuously. Clearly they were using their cultivation to make this sound. Damn it! Who is wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves? Xianxia muttered. The voice was very unfamiliar, so it should be someone he didn't know. He quickly rushed out of the lobby and saw 4 people standing in a row not far from the door, looking at him. The various feudal lords outside the door also indicated that it was them. Xianxia couldn't help but frown and ask, "Why did you call me out?" Chapter 881. Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan looked at each other with complicated expressions. In just a short while, a large group of people had already rushed out of the gate, especially the green-winged Bat King Wei Chuanxiu, who was looking them up and down with an unfriendly gaze, making it difficult for them to speak. "You know them?" Wei Chuanxiu turned around and asked. When he saw Xianxia shake his head slightly to indicate that he did not know him, he immediately turned around and glared at him. "Where did this bastard come from? Why are you shouting here?" Feng Jiru, who was floating in the air, sneered. Lan Hao, who was below, took a deep breath and said, "The 4 of us are the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Unfortunately, we have taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Chamber of Commerce, so we have come to challenge the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce, Xianxia." These words immediately caused a commotion. Those who knew them knew that they had always followed the lead of the Heartless Palace, so they quickly looked at Feng Jiru in the sky and understood what was going on. Xianxia, on the other hand, was startled. He did not expect that this troublesome matter would fall on him. Wei Chuanxiu checked the 4 cultivators and found that they were all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage. Thus, he sneered and said, "You know that I am here, but you dare come here to cause trouble? I don't think you fellows have the guts to do so. Tell me honestly who sent you fellows here." Her words immediately reminded everyone, and they all turned to look at Feng Jiru in the air. Ning Zixuan cupped his fists and said, "I've long heard of Bat King Wei's great name. The 4 of us wouldn't dare to cause trouble. It's just that we've taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Commerce Association. In addition, sect leader Yu's cultivation isn't high and our 4 sects are poor and can't afford to buy a mountain, so we have no choice but to challenge sect leader Yu." Her words were so direct that Xianxia rolled his eyes. Although he had guessed that Feng Jiru was behind this, it was obvious that she thought he was a pushover. Wei Chuanxiu was stunned when she heard that. She couldn't help but look at Xianxia with a smile. The lords of the various countries had also heard about the sect master's challenge, and they looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Su Yuchang cupped his fists and said, "Sect leader Yu, I'm sorry. Please follow us to the Life and Death Mound." The so-called Life and Death Mound was the one and only place in the illusory immortal city where one could fight, and its purpose was for the various sect leaders to challenge each other. Back when the Merchant Alliance set up this place, many people felt puzzled. Why didn't they allow people to fight in the illusory immortal city, but allowed the sect masters of the various sects to challenge each other? Everyone's gazes gathered on Xianxia. Yifuzi and the others looked at each other helplessly. They hadn't expected to encounter such a thing, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. Because this was the rule of the illusory immortal city, no one was allowed to interfere in a battle between sect masters. Xianxia was speechless at such a blatant challenge, which was allowed by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. He secretly sent a message to Wei Chuanxiu. "How are their cultivation levels?" "Their cultivation bases are not high. They are all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage." There was a hint of ridicule in Wei Chuanxiu's voice. "Damn it. Of course it's not high for you." Xianxia coughed and waved his hand at Lan Hao and the rest. "All right. Disperse. I refuse to accept your challenge." As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings went silent, and everyone revealed expressions of disbelief as they looked at him. This was the first time they'd heard of such a thing in Illusory City. "This fellow really isn't afraid of losing face because everyone in my sect is watching." Xianxia didn't feel any pressure at all. He continued to wave at everyone. "Everyone, welcome to my World Merchant Association. Everyone do what you need to do. Today, my World Merchant Association will be selling immortal herbs. All immortal herbs will be sold at half price. Everyone is welcome to purchase them." The lords didn't feel any pressure. They straightened the big red flowers on their chests and waved at everyone. "Please come in. Please come in." Everyone looked at each other. They found that as long as one was willing to lose face, everything was easy to do. Trouble would be solved in an instant. They all moved their feet and rushed inside. Wei Chuanxiu stared at Xianxia with a strange expression. He found that this guy's nonchalant expression didn't seem to be fake. His skin was really thick. Lan Hao and the rest didn't expect things to end like this. After being dumbfounded, they all became wild with joy. This was Yu Qianzhou's own refusal to challenge them. They couldn't be blamed. The four of them immediately looked back at Feng Jiuru in the air with a helpless expression. They were all prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Feng Jiuru's expression was distorted. She mocked loudly in the air. A dignified leader of a sect is actually afraid of battle and death. I think your World Merchant Association should just close down so that you don't embarrass yourself here. No matter how rational a person was, once they flew into a rage out of humiliation, they would always do unreasonable things. Feng Jiuru was like this. It seemed that if she didn't tear Yu Qianzhou into pieces or torment him to the point that he was too ashamed to show his face, she wouldn't be able to vent the anger in her heart. Lan Hao and the rest's expressions changed greatly. Anyone could tell that Feng Jiuru was provoking Yu Qianzhou. In an instant, everyone stopped and looked at Yu Qianzhou. Facing the pressuring gazes from all directions, Yu Qianzhou felt uncomfortable all over. He coughed and asked Wang Yi, "Elder Wan, you also know that I hate fighting and killing the most. Is it embarrassing for me to refuse someone else's challenge?" The lords were deeply suspicious of Yu Qianzhou's words that he hated fighting and killing. However, they were all on the same side, so naturally no one would expose it. This. Wang Yi smiled awkwardly. It's really hard to say, but you're the first sect master in the history of the psychedelic immortal city to refuse a challenge. Don't worry, no one can force you to do something like this. Just follow your heart, just follow your heart. Yu Qianzhou nodded in understanding. He then waved at everyone and said, "Everyone, please come in and do what you need to do. Don't pay attention to the mad dogs barking outside." Now that things had escalated to this point, the two sides would definitely fight to the death if there was an opportunity. However, because everyone had scruples in the psychedelic immortal city, Yu Qianzhou didn't plan to give Feng Jiuru any face. Most importantly, even if he gave her face, she wouldn't appreciate it. She would only take a mile when given an inch. Yu Qianzhou never did this kind of thing. Everyone looked at Feng Jiuru in the sky with strange expressions. They knew that he had lost a lot of face today. Not only did he lose his own face, but he also lost the Heartless Palace's face. They were afraid that the Heartless Palace wouldn't let him have a good time when he returned. This was equivalent to messing things up. Yu Qianzhou. A fierce shout came from the sky. Feng Jiuru said aggressively, "If you're afraid of death, just say it. If you don't dare to accept the challenge, then admit defeat in front of everyone. Don't think about bluffing your way through. Even if you hide today, I guarantee that there will be people coming to challenge you every day. If you have the ability, then hide for the rest of your life. Be a coward for the rest of your life." His voice shook the surroundings. He was clearly angry out of humiliation. The people from the various sects looked at him in surprise. They couldn't understand. The situation was very clear. The more he made a fuss like a shrew, the more face he would lose. Why did he have to do this? It was obvious that Yu Qianzhou wouldn't accept the challenge. Little B** starred looks like he's really eager to die. Wei Chuanqiu snorted coldly. His eyes were already filled with killing intent. Yu Qianzhou suddenly turned around and said through gritted teeth, "That's right. He's eager to die." As soon as he said that, to everyone's surprise, Yu Qianzhou leaped into the sky in a flash. He pointed at Feng Jiuru and shouted angrily, "Old dog. You're really tired of living. Don't think that I don't know that you're the one who instigated the 4 islands of Lake Light. It's none of your business whether I accept the challenge or not. If you can't stand it, then go back to your Heartless Palace." "What the hell? Why is the Heartless Palace full of scum? Scram. Don't embarrass yourself in my territory." The torturer was about to fly into a rage. The lords of the various countries exchanged glances. Everyone knew that this was how Yu Qianzhou behaved in the human world. Once he flew into a rage, there was nothing he wouldn't dare to do. Everyone couldn't hide the worry in their eyes. The difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great. In fact, Yu Qianzhou's safety was related to everyone's interests. The people of the various sects were speechless when they heard that. This Yu Qianzhou was indeed angered. He was already speaking without thinking. It was enough to target Feng Jiuru. Why did he have to drag the Heartless Palace into this? Once the Heartless Palace was angered, the consequences were not something that Yu Qianzhou or the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce could bear. Feng Jiuru's eyes were burning with excitement. She shouted, "Yu Qianzhou, how dare you insult my Heartless Palace? Don't give me that. You're already so old, yet you're still bringing out your backer. Even I feel ashamed for you." You're pestering me like a shrew. Yu Qianqiu slapped his chest and cursed. My words are as hard as nails. I dare to say it, so I dare to accept it. I'm insulting your heartless palace. How can a place like you come from? Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Yun Peng, who was silently observing the situation from the rooftop, stared at Yu Qianqiu with a sharp gleam in his eyes. Wei Chunqiu's eyes also lit up. He stroked his mustache and muttered, "How dare you insult the heartless palace like this?" Grandpa's cowardice wasn't in vain. Yafuzi, Wangi, and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. He was too impulsive. He was still too young. Mu Tianjiao's mouth was slightly agape. A man's courage was often the easiest thing to move a woman. Only Wan Ling had a matter-of-fact expression on her face. How could a trusted spy of an immortal emperor be afraid of the heartless palace? In truth, Yu Qianqiu was indeed enraged. However, he was not too impulsive. Feng Jiru was simply going overboard with her, pestering him time and time again. She had actually said that there would be people coming to challenge them every day. At this point, there was basically no room for reconciliation with the heartless palace. Instead, it was better to take things one step at a time. Since he was destined to have a conflict with the heartless palace, there was no point in enduring it anymore. He couldn't die a coward, right? Even if he died, he had to die with a bang. He couldn't let others look down on him. He was someone who cared about his reputation. Feng Jiuru wasn't angry. Instead, she laughed happily. Yu Qianqiu's words were enough. Even if Yu Qianqiu didn't accept the challenge today, it would give the heartless palace a chance to teach him a lesson. She chuckled. Don't pretend to be so daring. Someone who doesn't even dare to accept the sect master's challenge has no right to insult the heartless palace. He's just a coward who's afraid of death. Chapter 882. Well said. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and shouted, "If that's the case, you old dog shouldn't be afraid of death like me, right?" Everyone exchanged glances with the people around them. Even Feng Jiuru felt that there was a trap in his words, but she was angered by the continuous insults. Feng Jiuru's mouth twitched and she carefully responded, "At least, if I'm the leader of a sect and I'm challenged by a sect leader in this city, there's no reason for me to be a coward. It seems that you're really not afraid of death. Very well, I hope you're really not afraid of death." After a cold snort, Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly, "Since you're not afraid of death, how about we make a bet? As long as you agree to this bet, I'll accept the challenge of the four of them at all costs." With that said, he waved his arm and pointed at Lan Hao and the others below. Countless pairs of eyes widened and countless pairs of ears pricked up. Feng Jiuru's eyes flickered and she hesitated, worried that it was a trap, but Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, "What? You don't dare?" At this point, Feng Jiuru had to find a suitable reason to retreat, so she gritted her teeth and said, "What bet?" A domineering aura suddenly erupted from Yu Qianqiu's body. His tiger-like eyes widened as he scanned the crowd around him. He didn't even look at Feng Jiuru as he pointed a finger at her and said vehemently, "I'll bet your worthless life. If I lose, you can have my head and I won't regret it. If I win, I'll end your worthless life with my own hands. You're the one who started this and you're the one who kept pestering me. Do you dare to bet your life with me?" There was silence all around and only his words echoed in the air. It was really domineering. No one expected that he, who had shamelessly refused the challenge before, would take the initiative to accept the challenge, and he even said that he would bet his life with Feng Jiuru. With such courage, who would dare to say that he was afraid of death? Now it was up to Feng Jiuru to accept the challenge. However, everyone believed that Feng Jiuru would not refuse. If she wanted to take Yu Qianqiu's life, this was the perfect opportunity. One had to know that Yu Qianqiu was only at the spirit-severing stage while the four island sect masters were at the late exalted immortal stage. If any one of them came out to challenge Yu Qianqiu, it would be hard for him to survive. Those who were concerned about Yu Qianqiu were all on tenterhooks. Mu Tianjiao's hands were clenched tightly. This was especially true for the feudal lords who had followed Yu Qianqiu to the celestial realm. They were both nervous and excited. They wanted to see the strongest torturer in the human world fight against an immortal from the celestial realm, but they were also afraid that something might happen to Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu died, they would never be able to return to the human world. Many of them still had family members in the human world. Why wouldn't I? Since you're courting death, don't blame me. Feng Jiuru kept sneering. He couldn't think of a reason to refuse. He didn't believe that a cultivator at the late stage of Supreme Immortal Realm couldn't defeat a cultivator at the Soul Formation Realm. They were on completely different levels. Besides, if he didn't dare to accept it, then what he said before would be no different from farting. If he didn't have the guts to accept it, then the Heartless Palace's face would be bitten by dogs. By then, the Heartless Palace would skin him alive. The surroundings immediately became lively. Everyone knew that there was going to be a good show. There were also many people who looked at Yu Qianqiu sympathetically. In the end, he was still forced into a dead end by Feng Jiru. How could a small world chamber of commerce fight against the powerful Heartless Palace? They didn't even need to do anything. 4 sect masters. Sect Master Yu has accepted the challenge. The next step is up to you. Feng Jiru smiled at Lan Hao and the others. The 4 of them looked at each other and flashed into the sky. They waved their hands and said, "Please." "No hurry." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Feng Jiru raised her brows and said, "Why? Do you want to go back on your word?" Yu Qianqiu snorted and said, "I'm afraid that someone will go back on his word, so I have to find a witness who can restrain both sides." Feng Jiru looked down at Wei Chuanqiu and said mockingly, "Indeed, we should find a witness to prevent someone from going back on their words just because their cultivation is higher." Her meaning was obvious, and she was probably referring to Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu flashed into the sky and shouted at Feng Jiru, "Little bastard, who are you talking about?" Feng Jiru couldn't be bothered to touch his brows and kept silent. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "I'm afraid only the Great Radiance Wheel Executor can make decisions in this illusory immortal city, and only the Great Radiance Wheel Executor can effectively supervise our bet. Bat King Wei, can you invite the Great Bright Wheel Keeper to be a witness?" As soon as these words came out, not to mention the others, even Feng Jiru was a little surprised. She looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. She didn't know where he got the confidence to ask the Great Bright Wheel Keeper to be a witness. It should be known that if he, Yu Qianqiu, lost, he wouldn't even have a chance to go back on his word. If the Great Bright Wheel Keeper agreed, it would definitely not let any of the losers escape. Similarly, Feng Jiru couldn't escape. Wei Chuanqiu was slightly surprised. In fact, Feng Jiru had guessed his thoughts. If Yu Qianqiu lost, he was confident that he could save Yu Qianqiu's life. But if the Great Bright Wheel Keeper was present, he couldn't save him at the critical moment. Boy, are you crazy? Are you really confident that you can deal with those 4 T-sect masters? Wei Chuanqiu secretly transmitted his voice. I can even deal with you. Are you afraid that I can't deal with them? Nonsense. If I hadn't been careless and let my inner core fall into your hands, killing you would be easier than killing an ant. Do you think that my purple fire can't deal with the 4 of them? I admit that the power of the purple fire is very terrifying, but the way to fight is to adapt to the situation. Sometimes, no matter how good an external object is, it can't decide the outcome. After all, your cultivation is too low. If you insist, I won't stop you. Just return my inner core to me first. If something happens to you and I can't find my inner core, I'll be screwed by you. Damn. It seems that you don't have confidence in me. Yu Qianqiu said in a bad mood. Let me ask you, are you sure that the 4 of them are at the late exalted immortal stage and not great immortal stage? Wei Chuanqiu looked at Lan Hao and the other 3 suspiciously and replied, I have good eyesight. I'm sure that none of the 4 of them are above the late exalted immortal stage. From what you said, are you confident that you can deal with immortal cultivators below the great immortal stage? Don't worry so much, just help me invite the Great Bright Wheel to be the supervisor. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided not to tell him the reason. He remembered that when he was attacked in the Granite Mountains last time, the hunchbacked old man said that only experts who had reached the great immortal stage could resist his Absorbing Star's great technique. Since the Absorbing Star's great technique could deal with these 4 guys, there was no need for him to reveal his other trump cards. The 2 of them looked at each other without saying a word. Anyone could see that they were secretly communicating with each other. The longer Feng Jiru waited, the more worried she became. She was afraid that she would be taken advantage of, so she shouted, Aren't you going to invite the Great Bright Wheel? What are you waiting for? If you want to go back on your word, just say it. Wei Chuanqiu stared at him and said, Little bastard, you will cry. Just you wait. Then she turned into a stream of light and flew toward the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Feng Jiru gave Lan Hao and the others a look. The 4 of them cupped their hands at Yu Qianqiu and said, See you at the life and death mound. They flew away first. Feng Jiru sneered at Yu Qianqiu and flew after them. The surrounding people were in an uproar, and they all flew toward the life and death mound. Yu Qianqiu looked back at the pairs of eyes below and said indifferently, Don't join in the fun. Look after the house. These clowns are not worth mentioning. I will go back after I deal with them. The lords immediately cupped their hands and said, "Goodbye, sect master." Xianxia nodded and turned to fly away quickly. Master Ye, Mu Tianjiao, and the others immediately chased after him. The life and death mound was actually a rocky hill at the edge of the fantasy immortal city. It was not small. Rocks of all sizes were scattered all over the place. There were no trees, but there were many tenacious weeds growing in the cracks of the rocks. Some were green, some were withered, and some were yellow. It was a barren land. It could be seen that there had been a fight here from some of the broken rocks. However, it should have been a long time ago. In fact, there had not been a fight in the life and death mound for a long time. The sect masters of various sects were allowed to challenge each other here. However, once it reached this stage, it would almost always end in a fight to the death. Therefore, this place was called the life and death mound. Some people jokingly called it the graveyard of the sect masters. Almost no one would challenge each other unless they had no other choice. This was because the consequence of doing so was not only defeating the other party, but also forming a deep hatred with the other party's entire sect. The gains often did not make up for the losses. Therefore, very few people would do this. Now, the life and death mound, which had been barren for God knows how many years, suddenly became lively again. Figures landed around the life and death mound. Even the leaders of the various sects who had not appeared in the World Chamber of Commerce before showed up to watch the show. Feng Jiaoru looked at Xianxia, who had arrived late. To her, Xianxia's flying speed was not worth mentioning. She turned around and smiled at Lan Hao and the others beside her. "Let's not talk about anything else. Just his speed is enough to play him to death." Her disciple Sun Luan smiled. Lan Hao and the others could only awkwardly laugh a few times. Xianxia looked down. When he saw Feng Jiaoru, he landed beside her. Master Ye and the others who had flown with him also landed. The two enemies looked at each other and could not be bothered to look at each other. They silently waited for the witnesses to arrive with their hands behind their backs. After Wan Ling landed and looked around, she accidentally met the eyes of a woman not far away. She immediately smiled and nodded in greeting. This woman was none other than Long Xiaojiu, the granddaughter of Hidden Dragon Villa's elder, Duke Long Yu. Elders Duke Long Yu and Guang Juanru were also present, as well as the latter's grandson, Guang Yanzu. They had originally wanted to go take a look at the World Chamber of Commerce's opening. Coincidentally, Feng Jiaoru had sent a warning message. Therefore, like the other sects, they wanted to wait and see, so they did not appear at the World Chamber of Commerce. Now, like the other sects, they had all come to watch the show. When Long Xiaojiu saw Wan Ling's provocative greeting, she immediately gritted her teeth in anger. Her face was deathly pale and her delicate body trembled. The hatred of having her husband stolen surged into her heart. She wanted nothing more than to devour her flesh and bones. Chapter 883. After all, Wan Ling and the others were standing not far from them. In addition, they came together with the attention-grabbing Xianxia and the others. The people of the Hidden Dragon Manor naturally saw Wan Ling and subconsciously noticed Long Xiaojiu's abnormal behavior. In the entire Hidden Dragon Manor, Guang Yanzu was the only one who did not dislike Wan Ling. If it was not for Wan Ling stealing his love, Long Xiaojiu would have been married a long time ago. She would not have had the chance to marry him. "Jiao, don't lose your composure and let others laugh at you." Duke Long Yu frowned and transmitted his voice. Guang Juanru sighed softly and turned her head to look elsewhere. Out of sight, out of mind. Long Xiaojiu tried her best to control her emotions. She no longer looked at Wan Ling, who was grinning and showing off her strength. Her gaze fell on Xianxia, who was standing with Feng Jiaoru. She bit her lips and no one knew what she was thinking. Just as everyone was waiting patiently, someone suddenly shouted, "They're here!" Everyone looked in the same direction and saw a green flowing light and a golden flowing light shooting over at an unbelievable speed. In the blink of an eye, they flew over everyone's heads. They had no intention of stopping at the life and death mound and went far away in an instant. Everyone looked at each other. Many of them could tell that the two flowing lights were Wei Chuanxiu and the Great Bright Luan. However, what was strange was that the Great Bright Luan seemed to be chasing after Wei Chuanxiu. In terms of speed, it seemed that Wei Chuanxiu was slightly faster than the Great Bright Luan. "Wei Chuanxiu, stop right there." The Great Bright Luan's angry roar came faintly from afar. What happened? While everyone was confused and shocked, they saw a green and golden flowing light make a turn in the distant sky and fly back here. It was also at this moment that white crescent moons suddenly burst out from the golden light chasing after it. They circled around and strangled the green light with a thunderous momentum. More than a dozen moons drew strange arcs in the air as they chased after the green light that was rapidly escaping. Great Bright Luen, you actually played for real. Wei Chuanxiu's exasperated voice came from the sky. The two of them flew to the sky above the life and death mound once again. The green light that Wei Chuanxiu had transformed into did not seem to want to escape anymore. In an instant, the green flowing light flashed with a dazzling speed and created countless flowing light mirages. It shuttled back and forth and dodged the dozens of thunderous moon wheels. That miraculous speed of dodging caused everyone to gasp, and all of them sighed in their hearts. As expected of the Azure Wing Bat King that was skilled in speed in the immortal dimension. If it was any other person, that person would have probably perished beneath the lunar wheel that possessed shocking might. After a series of twists and turns, the dodging green light in the air found a gap and quickly teleported away. By the time everyone found Wei Chuanxiu, she was already hiding behind Mu Tianjiao, her clothes in a mess. She was wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. Wu Xiong's wife, on account that Yu Qianqiu is your friend, quickly tell this madman to stop. Mu Tianjiao looked at him speechlessly. She also knew her own limits. How could she have the qualifications to order around the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's Great Bright Wheel? She really could not ask for this favor. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so powerful full moon discs came crashing down with a thunderous momentum, scaring the people down below. Just as they were about to flee, the full moon discs suddenly stopped and quickly bounced back into the sky. However, the powerful pressure that came with it just now still forced many people to stagger. The rocks under their feet were sent flying everywhere. Even after he stopped, the momentum was still astonishing. With a flash of golden light, the Great Bright Wheel appeared in the sky. It converged into dozens of white lunar wheels and drilled into his arms. The Great Bright Wheel glared at Wei Chuanxiu below with murderous eyes. If it was not for Mu Tianjiao, it would not care how many people were standing below and whether it would hurt the innocent. It would have already killed them all in one fell swoop. Wu Xiong's wife still has a lot of face. Wei Chuanxiu cupped his hands towards Mu Tianjiao to express his gratitude. He then laughed at the Great Bright Wheel in the sky. Great Bright Wheel, I knew you would give Wu Xiong face and not lay a hand on his woman. You bastard, so many years have passed and you're still so useless. What kind of ability is it to rely on a woman to protect your life? The Great Bright Wheel pointed at him and shouted angrily. If you have the ability, come out and see if I don't skin you alive, you bat. Everyone could see that Wei Chuanxiu was definitely up to no good and had angered the Great Bright Wheel. Otherwise, the Great Bright Wheel would not have personally chased after him. From their words, it could be heard that the two of them had known each other for many years. Previously, when Wei Chuanxiu was able to invite the Great Bright Wheel to the Chamber of Commerce, many people had this guess. However, they were still fine last time. How did they fall out this time? Some of the elders in the immortal world might know that Wei Chuanxiu, Yun Peng, and the Great Bright Wheel were inseparable friends. Later, the three of them were noticed by the Immortal Palace and wanted to recruit them into the Immortal Palace. It was also because of this that the three of them had a disagreement and parted on bad terms. In the end, the Great Bright Wheel joined the Immortal Palace while Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng continued to roam freely in the immortal world, not wanting to be bound by others. What everyone did not know was that Wei Chuanxiu was able to invite the Great Bright Wheel to the Chamber of Commerce because of their past relationship. Otherwise, how could a normal person invite the powerful Great Bright Wheel? However, what made the Great Bright Wheel unhappy was that not long after he returned to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, Wei Chuanxiu came to ask him to be some bullshit witness, which he immediately rejected. Wei Chuanxiu begged a few times to no avail and was a little angry. He could not help but kick the Great Bright Wheel's butt, which made the Great Bright Wheel fly into a rage and the two of them immediately fought. This fight almost caused the experts of the entire Chamber of Commerce Alliance to surround and attack Wei Chuanxiu. Fortunately, the Great Bright Wheel remembered their past relationship and did not let others interfere. After they started fighting, Wei Chuanxiu could not help but be convinced that, just like before, he was still no match for the Great Bright Wheel. He could only take a beating and had no choice but to escape. Due to his talent, although Wei Chuanxiu was no match for the Great Bright Wheel, he was faster, which led to the scene everyone saw. What are you arguing about? Do you think I like to see your stinky face? Wei Chuanxiu pointed at Mu Tianjiao indignantly and said, if it wasn't for Wu Xiong's friend asking me to invite you, who the hell would go find you? When he said this, Mu Tianjiao stared at Wei Chuanxiu, dumbfounded, as if asking what did this have to do with her. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched and he touched his forehead weakly. He had to admit that this old bat was even more shameless than him. Everyone looked at Wei Chuanqiu speechlessly and could not help but admire this guy. Only he dared to talk to the Great Bright Wheel's owner like this. The Great Bright Wheel was startled when he heard this. He looked at Mu Qinjiao and immediately reacted. He was almost confused by Wei Chuanqiu's words. It was so complicated, but it had nothing to do with Mu Qinjiao at all. It was nothing more than Yu Qianqiu asking him to invite him. Shameless guy. Get out here. The Great Bright Wheel roared angrily. Wei Chuanqiu laughed and could not be bothered with him. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, I have already invited the person for you. As for whether he agrees or not, it is not something I can control. You guys do as you see fit. After saying this, he tidied up his messy hair and clothes. Damn it. What an old scoundrel. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze, but now was not the time to argue with the old bat. He immediately turned to Feng Jiuru and sneered, The Great Bright Wheel's owner has come as you wish. If you have something to say it quickly. She doesn't have time to wait for you. He deeply understood that he was not that big. It was better to leave such a big vat to the senior. Everyone in the surroundings almost fainted upon hearing this, and all of them looked at Feng Jiuru sympathetically. She was really unlucky to have run into these two shameless people, one big and one small. Mu Qinjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Wan Ling was also speechless. How could the Emperor Immortal's trusted spy be like this? Wei Chuanqiu winked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile as if he was praising his adaptability. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu wanted to kick him to vent his anger. He wanted to kick this incompetent guy to death. Feng Jiuru, who hadn't expected to be blamed on her, was stunned. Then her expression changed drastically as she looked at the Great Bright Wheel. She waved her hand and said, It has nothing to do with me. It was Yu Qianqiu who came up with the idea to invite you here. Bullshit. Yu Qianqiu scolded, How dare you say that you didn't give permission? Under the watchful eyes of so many people, you still dare to lie through your teeth? Damn it. Is your heartless palace shameless? Feng Jiuru was a little panicked. Thinking that she had given permission, she did not know how to defend herself. She was so anxious that her forehead was covered with sweat. Enough. As the owner of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, the Great Bright Wheel was not someone who could be easily fooled. He stared at Yu Qianqiu coldly and shouted, Ever since you came to the psychedelic immortal city, you have been playing all kinds of tricks. There has been no peace in the psychedelic immortal city. Don't put labels on others. Do you think I'm easy to fool? Everyone looked at each other and realized that the owner of the Great Bright Wheel was indeed not easy to fool. Hearing this, Feng Jiuru's heart finally relaxed, and the eyes she looked at Yu Qianqiu became even more resentful. Owner, you've wrongly accused me. Yu Qianqiu looked as if he had suffered a great injustice, but before he could defend himself, he heard De Mingluan shout, Shut up. Then he looked at Wei Chuanqiu and said, Didn't you want me to be the supervisor? Fine. I'll be the owner. It's good that this kid dies early so you don't have to come out and embarrass yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, he landed beside Wei Chuanqiu in a flash, giving Wei Chuanqiu a fright. In the end, he saw that De Mingluan was not moving at all and did not seem to have any intention of making a move. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and mumbled, Take off your pants to fart, what an unnecessary move. De Mingluan quickly swept a glance at him, then looked around and shouted decisively, Begin. The people at the side subconsciously moved a few steps away from the Great Bright Wheel. The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face turned cold. He tilted his head to look at Feng Jiuru and the others. He then flew directly to the center of the rocky hill. Chapter 884. This barren rocky hill was jokingly called the sect leader's graveyard. Who knew how many sect leaders had lost their lives here? The past had become history and the fallen could not be resurrected. Only the luxuriant weeds stubbornly took root here, giving this place some life. Very few sect leaders would come to this ominous place. But after many years, the story of this place was about to repeat itself. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly on a relatively flat rock, staring calmly at Feng Jiuru and the others. Suddenly, the wind became stronger and the weeds between the rocks began to sway. They seemed to have sensed something, and the withered weeds flew into the air, and no one knew where they would land. Under Feng Jiuru's secret, almost frantic urging, Lan Hao and the others had no other choice. But before they came, the estrangement caused by the fight for sect leader had been resolved. They knew that even if they won, the experts of the World Commerce Association would not let them return safely to the 4 islands of Lake Light. But they had no choice. Feng Jiuru would not let them return safely either. Furthermore, she had threatened them with their families. Thus they made an agreement among themselves. If any of the four of them were lucky enough to return, they would take the tokens of the sect masters of the 4 islands and restore the 4 islands to a single sect. At the same time, they would also entrust their families to them. Although the World Commerce Association allowed the sect leaders to challenge each other here, they did not allow a group fight. In other words, each challenge could only be one-on-one. Bao Tuxing flashed out from among the 4. He floated in the air and looked down. Xianxia also looked up and their gazes met. The former's gaze was indifferent. He clearly did not think it would be difficult to defeat Xianxia. Meanwhile, Xianxia's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. In fact, Xianxia knew that as long as he was vigilant, he could escape at any time and no one could catch him. But he also knew what today's battle meant. This was a hurdle for the World Commerce Association. If he escaped, it would be equivalent to losing, and the territory he had painstakingly built would be handed over to someone else. This was something he would never allow, so he would never run away from today's battle unless it was absolutely necessary. Since he accepted the challenge, he had to win. There were more than 300 pairs of eyes watching him from behind. As the #1 expert in the world, he could not disappoint them. At the same time, he recalled the scene when he parted ways with Bai Changchun in front of the gate to the underworld. He had promised Bai Changchun that he would not let him down. Xianxia's clothes were fluttering in the wind. Suddenly, Du Karen's voice resounded in his ears. Xianxia, be careful. The people of the 4 islands of Lake Light are proficient in the art of controlling water. Although I've never met them before, I'm sure they must have some tricks up their sleeves. Water manipulation technique? Xianxia immediately felt that his chances of winning had increased by a few notches. He shouted towards the sky, "Come!" Wei Chuanxia's small eyes immediately focused on it without blinking. She seemed a little nervous. De Ming Luan tilted his head slightly to look at him. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. He looked at Xianxia with confusion. When Bao Tuxing saw that Xianxia did not have anything in his hands and was fighting him with his bare fists, his hand that was reaching for his storage bracelet stopped. He said indifferently, "The difference between our cultivations is too big. I'll let you make the first move." His words sounded as if he wanted Xianxia to accept his defeat wholeheartedly. Xianxia snorted coldly. He did not say anything else. He knew that he could not be careless when fighting with such an opponent. If he was hit by the opponent, he could lose his life. He estimated the distance between them. It was a few hundred meters. With his current cultivation, he could only lock onto an opponent within 50 meters. Even if the opponent broke into his range, if the opponent was too vigilant and dodged too quickly, he would not be able to lock onto the opponent in time. In that case, he would not be able to find a chance to use the Absorbing Star's great technique. The difference between their cultivations was too big. Sneak attack was still the best way. Xianxia gradually clenched his fists. His perception surged into the ground from under his feet like a tide and quickly spread to the surroundings. With his current cultivation, he was still unable to use his perception in the air. He needed a medium to transmit his perception. However, the vast ground was his best medium. Everyone could tell from the minute changes in Xianxia's body that he was about to make a move. As he slowly spread his arms, everyone felt as if the ground was trembling along with his arms. When everyone clearly saw that the rocks on the rocky hill were shaking, they were immediately shocked. This scene was too shocking. Anyone who saw a large area of rocks vibrating would be shocked. How could this be? Everyone was in disbelief. It was as if Xianxia's movement and frown had already affected the entire rocky hill. Could it be that Xianxia's cultivation had already reached such a high level? This was not something a soul formation stage cultivator could do. Could it be that he was deliberately hiding his cultivation? No wonder he dared to challenge the Heartless Palace. Wei Chuanxia was stunned. Then he excitedly rubbed his hands. This guy really had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. The great bright wheel was still calm. However, his attention was completely focused on Xianxia. Bao Tuxing, who was in the air, immediately raised his guard. Under everyone's gaze, he had already said that he would let Xianxia make the first move. He couldn't go back on his word. Suddenly his pupils shrank. He saw Xianxia shake his arms. A dense gray shadow suddenly shot out from the rocks that covered the mountain. They formed into a group with Xianxia as the center and quickly circled around him. Everyone was dumbstruck. It was actually tens of thousands of stone flying swords. Within the dense gray shadow, Xianxia suddenly pointed his arm at Bao Tuxing and shouted, 10,000 flying swords. So, the sound of the air being pierced could be heard. The dense gray shadow shot towards Bao Tuxing in an astonishing amount. Regardless of how powerful it was, the scene was truly spectacular. Bao Tuxing quickly waved his palms left and right, releasing rays of multicolored light, immediately shattering the stone flying swords that were rushing towards him. After exchanging a few blows, he discovered that although the stone flying swords that filled the sky looked astonishing, they were actually unable to withstand a single blow. He immediately snorted coldly, "I thought it was some kind of powerful move, so it's just a show. Now it's my turn." His body turned into a silver stream of light in the air, and actually broke through the stone flying swords that were attacking him. He rushed towards Yu Qianqiu, and the hundreds and thousands of stone flying swords were unable to obstruct him at all. Such a small distance was covered in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled into a cold smile. The qi that he had set up in the air directly wrapped around Bao Tuxing, who had rushed down. He opened his claw in the air and exhaled, "Star-absorbing great technique." As soon as these words came out, Wan Ling, who had been watching quietly, felt her eyelids twitch. The scene of Tsang Lianxing and Chai Junlang's tragic deaths immediately appeared in her mind. Du Feng and the others who had seen this move in the ruins of God, also watched the outcome with their mouths wide open. A cloud of white smoke suddenly burst out of the silver flowing light that was diving down at high speed, and a horrifying figure that looked like a mummy appeared. It let out a shrill howl of horror from its throat, waving its stiff limbs and desperately trying to flee for its life. However, his current speed was worlds apart from before. He wasn't much faster than the birds in the sky. "Fancy? Then I'll show you how powerful I am." Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly, facing the empty air with his 5 claws. He formed a sword technique with 2 fingers, and pointed at the corpse that was fleeing in the air. The area around Yu Qianqiu immediately exploded like a series of cannons, and streaks of green light shot out from the stones on the ground, soaring into the sky. Over 100 streaks of green light quickly caught up to the fleeing corpse. With a burst of green light, it was turned into a hornet's nest in an instant. With a crisp dang sound in the air, a storage bracelet was bounced by a green stream of light. Yu Qianqiu, who had one hand behind his back and one hand in the air, happened to grab it. Without even looking at it, he directly put it away. Almost at the same time, the hundreds of cyan streams of light returned to where they came from. With a series of ping-ping sounds, they surrounded Yu Qianqiu and shot into the ground, disappearing without a trace, leaving only smoke and dust floating in the air. Yu Qianqiu placed his hands behind his back and watched the corpse in the air fall to the ground indifferently. The stone flying swords that were still circling in the air adjusted their direction, and with a shwa-shwa sound, thousands of gray shadows shot down, and in the blink of an eye, all of them stabbed into the surroundings of Yu Qianqiu. The surging smoke gradually drifted away, and Yu Qianqiu's figure appeared in everyone's line of sight again. From beginning to end, Yu Qianqiu stood on the stone and didn't move at all. Among the tens of thousands of stone swords, he looked back, stared at Feng Jiuru and said indifferently, "Next." The unshakable momentum of the wind and clouds was not weaker than that of a grandmaster of a generation. Feng Jiuru was inexplicably frightened by his gaze and everyone was stunned. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu's methods would be so terrifying. Although the momentum of the tens of thousands of swords was terrifying, it was still not comparable to the palm that could directly turn Bao Tuxing into a dried corpse. If that palm was aimed at them, everyone shuddered at the thought of it. It was too terrifying. After Master Ye's generation recovered from the shock, they all looked at Shui Mingqing's generation with questioning eyes. Shui Mingqing and the others nodded slightly, indicating that this was the star-absorbing great technique that Yu Qianqiu had used to kill the disciples of Heartless Palace in the ruins of God. However, when a few elders secretly asked a few juniors about the 10,000 swords, they all expressed that they didn't know. This was the first time they had seen Yu Qianqiu use it. Although Wei Chuanqiu had been with Yu Qianqiu for a long time, it was the first time she had seen Yu Qianqiu use such a terrifying star-absorbing great technique. When she thought about how this guy had so many powerful killing moves hidden on him, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. "Wei Chuanqiu, what is going on between you and this Yu Qianqiu?" The Great Bright Will calmly asked. "What do you mean what is going on?" Wei Chuanqiu came back to his senses and asked in confusion. The Great Bright Will slowly turned his head to look at him and with a cold gaze he said word by word, "Don't play dumb with me. Didn't you remember anything from Yu Qianqiu's 10,000 swords? It seems that I need to remind you. Myriad Swords Demon Monarch." Chapter 885. Wei Chuanqiu was startled, and immediately thought of the demon monarch who terrorized both the immortal and netherworld. At that time, his cultivation was still shallow, and he did not have the qualifications to intervene in the war. However, he had witnessed the scene of the battle, and he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of it. Looking at Xianxia standing in the midst of the swords and smiling coldly, the scene of the swords just now did indeed give people a sense of déjà vu. This scene seemed to have been seen by the demon monarch who rode on the divine dragon. This matter can be big or small. You better explain it clearly or else it will not benefit either of us, especially you and Yun Peng. De Ming Luan warned him. Wei Chuanxiu looked at him and replied sarcastically, "What do you mean by big or small? You can't be suspecting that Xianxia is related to the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, right? Didn't the demon monarch of 10,000 swords already die in the hands of Jin Tai? What nonsense are you thinking about?" "I cannot think too much, but can you guarantee that the immortal emperor will not think too much?" De Ming Luan snorted and said, "The demon monarch of 10,000 swords is the only one who can threaten him after the seal of the demon realm. Today the scene of Xianxia controlling the swords will reach his ears sooner or later. As the person involved and the person in charge of this place, he will call me for questioning sooner or later. If I can't give him an explanation that will make him feel at ease, you and Yun Peng should prepare to be buried with Xianxia. I'm afraid I will not be able to absolve myself from the blame." Wei Chuanxiu fell into a short silence. He knew that what De Ming Luan said was the truth. Jin Tai was a ruthless and arrogant person, and would definitely not allow anyone who could threaten his rule to exist. If he did not have a reason to feel at ease, it would indeed be a big problem. He paused and said, "I also can't explain this matter clearly, let's ask him after this matter is over." At this moment the remaining 3 people from the 4 islands of Lake Light suddenly quarreled, and immediately stopped the conversation between the two. This attracted everyone's attention. Everyone thought that they were afraid of death and pushing the blame to each other. When everyone heard the content of their conversation, they all sighed with emotion. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. "If you still recognize me as your eldest senior brother, then listen to me." Following Lan Hao's angry shout, Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan lowered their heads in grief and indignation. Lan Hao extended his hand and pulled over the items that the two of them were holding. One was a silvery raincoat with a bamboo hat, and the other was a fishing net. Those who didn't know would think that they were fishing tools used by fishermen, but in fact they were 2 of the 4 treasures of the 4 islands of Lake Light. The 4 disciples each took one of the 4 treasures: a gourd, a straw cape, a fishing net, and a fishing rod. The fishing rod was in Bao Tuxing's hands, but because he had underestimated his opponent, he was killed before he could take out his treasures. The storage bracelet with the treasures also fell into Xianxia's hands. "Eldest senior brother?" Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan suddenly shouted at the same time. Their voices were a bit low. After looking at each other, the 2 of them took the 2 items from Lan Hao's hands. Su Yuchang shook open the straw cape and personally put it on Lan Hao. Ning Zixuan used a special method to wrap the fishing net around Lan Hao's arm. "I think Master will be very happy to see us like this." Lan Hao laughed heartily. Then he also took out a large gray gourd from his storage bracelet and tied it to his waist. This meant that he had 3 of the 4 treasures on him. The reason why they made such a grand scene was because the way Xianxia killed Bao Tuxing was too shocking. Bao Tuxing didn't even have a chance to resist before the outcome was decided. At this moment, in the eyes of the 3 disciples, Xianxia was definitely an expert who had hidden his cultivation. Otherwise, how could a soul formation stage cultivator be so powerful? In fact, they weren't the only ones who thought this way. Many of the onlookers thought the same because no one could see through Xianxia's cultivation. When the rabbit dies, the fox grieves, and the disciples let go of their previous enmity, so they all took out their treasures and focused them on one person. They felt that this was the only way they could defeat Xianxia. Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan's eyes were filled with grief and helplessness as they watched Lan Hao fly over the life and death mound. In fact, the one who was the most worried and afraid was Feng Juru. She never thought that Xianxia would be so powerful that he could kill Bao Tuxing so easily. If all the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light were defeated, then she would be in trouble. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but sneak a glance at the Great Bright Wheel who was supervising the battle. Coincidentally, the Great Bright Wheel's cold gaze swept over, causing her to immediately turn around in a panic. Seeing Lan Hao in such a strange outfit, Xianxia immediately raised his guard. He didn't even need to think about it to know that Lan Hao was definitely wearing treasures. Otherwise, the disciples wouldn't have to dress so solemnly. "Junior brother. I'll take revenge for you." Lan Hao roared. He grabbed the big gourd at his waist with one arm and pulled out the stopper of the big gourd with the other. Then he slapped the gourd and a column of water shot out from the mouth of the gourd. Xianxia's eyes narrowed. When the column of water came out of the gourd, it was only a thin stream of water. Who knew that it would suddenly become bigger after a short distance? The water waves were like a torrential river that poured down from the sky with a rumbling sound. What made Xianxia feel strange was that the torrential waves released from the gourd did not come for him. Instead, they were like a huge water dragon that wriggled in all directions. Xianxia, this is the water gourd of the 4 treasures of Lake Light. He's setting up the heavenly water formation. You can kill him while he's setting up the formation. Huo Lianqing of the mythical fire palace was also secretly playing the good guy. Hearing him say it so easily, as if killing a late-stage ascendant immortal cultivator was really as easy as cutting vegetables, Xianxia couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He was the clearest about his own strength. As long as he left the ground, he would immediately fall into a passive situation. The attack speed that he could display with his cultivation was simply not enough to catch the opponent's eyes. Even if he used his purple flames and divine sword, he probably wouldn't even be able to touch the opponent, let alone kill him. Sneak attacks when the opponent was unprepared was the way to go. Most importantly, being in the air meant that the attack range was wider, while being on the ground meant that there was more room for maneuver. At the very least, he could escape underground. He calmly watched the opponent set up the formation. In the eyes of others, they thought that he had a card up his sleeve. Who knew that he was doing this because he had no other choice? In a short while, the water dragon had entrenched itself into a huge water cube that occupied an extremely large area. The strange thing was that it did not collapse. The area within a radius of several miles had already become a vast body of water. The rocky hills were completely submerged. The onlookers had already risen into the air to watch. Everyone could vaguely see that Xianxia was still standing motionlessly at the bottom of the water. At this moment, the water gourd in Lan Hao's hand had also stopped pouring water down. Just a slight movement of the gourd would cause the waves below to surge. Clearly, it could draw in the water cube below. A cold smile appeared on Lan Hao's face. Since the opponent was so arrogant, it was obvious that he did not know the power of his water sky formation. Then, as if he was hugging a waste drum, he used his other hand to continuously slap the body of the gourd. 2 huge waves immediately surged up from the surging waves below, condensing into 2 huge fists. They opened their palms and aimed at Xianxia at the bottom of the water. With a loud bang, they broke through the waves and grabbed at him. At first, Xianxia was a little worried. However, after staying in the water for a while, he discovered that it was only SOSO. Although this part of the water seemed to be controlled by something, it seemed that his control over the water art was stronger. When he discovered that the opponent was actually controlling the water to deal with him, he was immediately speechless. He was really displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. He actually dared to play with water in front of me. Then let's play. The undercurrent carried a huge pressure as it approached. He could clearly see the 2 huge dark blue hands grabbing at him. Xianxia waved his large sleeves. The 2 huge hands instantly collapsed and disappeared, merging into the water. The water gourd in his hand trembled and instantly lost contact with the 2 huge hands. Lan Hao was immediately shocked. In this heavenly water formation, the gourd in his hand was the master of this part of the water. The 2 huge hands that were condensed were not afraid of being damaged at all. This was because this part of the water could repair them at any time and then continue to attack the opponent. As long as the opponent's cultivation was not ridiculously high, being trapped in the formation was equivalent to being trapped in an endless entanglement. However, the opponent just waved his hand casually and immediately and silently broke his spell. This was a little too inconceivable. Could it be that his cultivation had reached an unimaginably terrifying level? Everyone who witnessed the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although most of them didn't know much about the power of the heavenly water array, they could tell from Lan Hao's shocked expression that something must have happened that shocked him. Everyone could also see some clues from the sudden change in Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang's expressions. Lan Hao loosened his grip on the gourd and hung it back on his waist. He understood in his heart that since the opponent had dealt with it so easily, it would be useless to use water again. His figure flashed and like a meteor, he drilled into the water below with a bang. The straw cape on his body flashed with a white light, and his entire person disappeared on the spot. This time, it was immediately Xianxia's turn to be nervous. He quickly looked around but he could not see the opponent's figure at all. This was a little too terrifying. His perception immediately surged out like a tide and spread out. This part of the water immediately became a part of his body. **Ck. He could actually become invisible. Xianxia was shocked. He instantly discovered the opponent's position, but he could not see him at all. What shocked him the most was that when his perception swept over the other party's body, it felt as if there was nothing there, as if the other party didn't exist at all. If it wasn't for the fact that he had complete control over this region of water, he wouldn't be able to hide anything from him. He would definitely be at a disadvantage. Xianxia immediately thought of the straw cape on the opponent's body. There must be something strange about this straw cape. After Lan Hao drilled into the water, he immediately held his breath and stealthily hid for a while. Although he was very confident in the treasured clothes on his body, he now treated Xianxia as a real expert. He did not dare to relax at all. After waiting for a while, he carefully and slowly approached. He did not dare to cause any changes in the water. He was prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Xianxia was immediately speechless. He did not expect that there would be such a shameless person. He actually dared to play a sneak attack on him in the water. He simply continued to pretend to look around blankly. More than 10 purple flame-flying swords quietly burrowed into the ground under his feet. He was also prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. You're tuning in to this Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.